Good evening. Okay, welcome to the December work session. It's a work session, so we don't need roll call, and Mr. Fulbright is not here, so I'm going to try to do my best to get through this. We'll start down here with, let me get myself going. Budget amendments.
Good morning, board members.
Good morning.
We have about 11, good evening, sorry. I didn't just wake up, I just never went to bed, I guess. So tonight we've got about 11 budget amendments on the agenda. I'm going to start with budget amendment number 11065, and feel free to stop me if this takes too long. So budget amendment 11065, we prepared it December 7th, 2021. This is the general purpose fund, the IT department budget, and we are moving money from tech fees that was part of maintenance and repair services. We're moving those funds over to their other equipment line item in order to do some equipment replacement, and all of the appropriate supervisors have signed the budget amendment for your approval. And that's pretty much the entirety of this budget amendment.
Any questions? Consent? Okay.
Okay. Next is 11066. This is athletic donations. So we received some donations at Woodard and Withorn Middle School. Woodard Elementary and Withorn Middle School, $5,000 apiece. And so we are recording the revenue for receiving those donations and allocating them to programs for those schools. The line items amended are 141, that's our general purpose fund, Department 72120, and that is health services, which is Mr. Pointer's departmental budget, and 599 other costs, and then the location code identifies the schools they're going to of Woodard and Withorn. The appropriate supervisors have signed the budget amendment, and it's for middle school and elementary school athletics.
Mr. Lindsay?
What's why district funds? Why did it not just go straight to school funds?
And Mr. Perriman's here to answer that.
The donation was actually just straight to the athletics, the department of the county. That was the wish of the people donating.
If no other questions, can we put it on consent? Consent? Okay, keep going.
Next budget amendment is 11067. This is the Art Funds budget amendment. It was prepared on December 7th, 2021, and you can see there are various line items. 141 is our general purpose fund, 71-100 is regular instruction, 429 is regular instructional materials and supplies, and then they're broken out by all the locations that are receiving art funds. 278 is the code, the final GL code on there that identifies art funds specifically so that they're tracked and used for that specific purpose. This was divvied out by enrollment at each school and allocated a total amount of $48,000, and the appropriate supervisors have signed this budget amendment.
Okay. I would be remiss if I didn't comment. You're asking to take it out of general fund, and I don't have a problem with any of that, but what I want everybody to know is that this is essentially buying textbooks for those art teachers, because without supplies, they can't teach, they can't have class. So I would also think you might want to take it out of textbooks, since we have a $900,000, we've been able to essentially really get our textbooks up to date. But I'm glad it's being done. It's a little late in the year. That means they really won't be able to order textbooks till the middle of January. So it's not really providing them the textbooks they needed at the beginning of the school. So I would hope, school board, going forward, that you would consider this as textbooks and that it needs to be part of our budget. Mr. Moore.
Actually, I was going to echo that. I was going to ask, Ms. Kinzer said this at the meeting, I think it was last week, and it kind of stuck in my ear. And I was just wondering, why have we never really considered art supplies as textbooks?
Well, and so depending on, before, I think we just only bought art supplies, because you remember years ago we could teach art or music, and we decided as a board that we would do both. That generated us having a consistent program every year. I think in art and in music in elementary, there is a curriculum, and we do go through a textbook adoption for those. And I remember in the past where we have purchased art textbooks.
Can I interrupt and tell you that we were given textbooks in the art department, didn't want them, told not to buy them, for we don't use them. We actually gave them to Mount Pleasant Middle School when they opened that school, and then next thing we knew, a whole nother adoption showed up. I was on the adoption committee one time, and I told them these are not the kind of books we need for high school, and definitely not for elementary. And I told all my students that when they came to class, they had to have a pencil, because that was their textbook. Okay, sorry.
And we try to work, if there's an advanced placement class, if we know the type of book that, but we have to go through that process. One, it has to be on the adopted list for us to consider, or we have to ask the state, can we adopt it? So typically, a lot of them, they will blanket adopt the whole list, so that if they do have a particular course, and we can say, oh, these are the books available, and then they can, meet as a committee and then go ahead and choose that book.
I guess I think what she's saying and what kind of I'm getting to is even though we're using the word textbook, technically it's not a textbook. So in my mind, and let me give you an idea of where I'm looking to go with this, and I believe Ms. Kinzer is thinking the same thing. When I say textbook, I just mean the materials required to teach the class. And that could be a textbook in some settings, but it may also be just other materials that are required for that. I know there's other classes, maybe science classes, that have some other lab-type materials that are required or needed for us to teach the class. And what I'm thinking is that we need to find a way to make sure that those are accounted for each year, rather than us asking for budget amendments after the fact to come up with money to go into that. Now, I don't know how to get there, and I think that's probably a long process that we've got a little bit of time before budget gets here, but that's what I'm thinking. So when I'm saying textbook, now what you're kind of hinting at is that if it's not on a formal state-adopted textbook list, it can't be considered a textbook. Do we have other things that we buy out of that textbook line item that are not officially a textbook? How broad is that category allowed to be used
So
for?
that's the thing, is we're coding it to 429, and that's instructional materials and supplies.
Okay.
So that I think really identifies what you would need for an art program, I guess, just being general with it. But textbooks has its own line item, and you are buying textbooks.
But do we buy things that are not technically textbooks? Out
Like
of the textbook line item?
media curriculum, basically
Sure.
digital textbooks, yes.
Okay.
And normally what we try to do is, because it's a 449 textbook line, we would ask you if there was money available, like it's going to be this year. We would then say, hey, let's move that money. We would ask to move it to 429.
Well, I guess
Yes.
let me tell you the direction I'm looking to go. I know this board has said over and over again that we want to make sure that when we start next school year that we have no child shows up the second week of school and says, I don't have a textbook. And I know personally, and other board members may want to chime in on that too, but I would consider to be an art class to be not much different than that. I wouldn't expect that we would have a student show up for an art class and not be saying, I don't have the materials needed to do the class that you put me in. So in my mind, that's the reason when I say textbook, that's kind of, I'm using it broadly, I guess. So I'd be interested in other board members, because again, that's my standard as well. Just like I don't want them to show up and not have a history book or not have a science book, I also do not want them to show up and have a class where they don't have the materials needed to complete that class. So what I would be asking is, how do we find a way where, and this is beyond obviously this budget amendment right here, I think we need to get away from asking for additional money and just figure out how this is budgeted, whatever that number is, and maybe the staff and the people that handle these departments, the art teachers themselves, can come up with some numbers to help us figure out what that looks like. But I just think that needs to be budgeted annually, because it is a cost and it's something our kids need in those classes.
Mr. Howe.
And I want to echo some of that too. I think this kind of goes back to, why are we not budgeting this? This is the third year we've pulled $48,000, and we've just pulled 48,000. I think the first year that's what it was, and we just kind of gone with it. I mean, maybe it needs to be more. I don't know. I can certainly say it's probably not less. I mean, I want to know if we are fully funding this, or if we are just, throwing a few pennies at it. What does it need to be? And then the other thing is to piggyback on the textbook thing. It's not just. I mean, there are so many things that we haven't bought textbooks for. I mean, health is one. You have high school textbooks for health that say that we currently use that say refer back to the VHS. Well, once the teacher explains what a VHS is, and Lord knows that VHS tape is nowhere near to be seen, much less do we have a VCR to play it on. Then they have to look at the pictures in there and the track suits and stuff that no one really wears. The teacher spends more time explaining the 90s than they do teaching the health. And things have changed since the 90s as far as health goes. So there are little classes like this that we have just not bought for. So we just need to make sure that we are looking at holistically everything.
I assume we want to put in,
sorry.
excuse me. Oh, Mr. Lindsay, sorry. This is your job, isn't it?
Is it all right that I answer Mr. Howell's question
Of course
before
it
we
is,
move forward?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. So we spent $45,578 of the 48 last year. The rest was returned back to the district. I don't know if they needed more and weren't able to spend it in the whole fiscal year or not. Maybe that's something that staff will have to look at when they prepare the budget. The second thing is we had it in the operating budget to start for this year, and it was one of the items cut. So.
Mr. Lindsay.
Just for the sake of time, is there anywhere in 71-100 we could take this from rather than taking out of fund balance?
We could. They'd be fine to take it out of textbooks.
And I just say that expedites the process, and so it doesn't have to go for the commission. So.
Is that how you would like? Is this board have a consensus that would be what you would like to see at the voting meeting?
Is there any objection? There's still a light on the left.
Sure. I just wanted to go back to the art instructional supplies. If this is, to echo the others, if this is something we're going to do annually, I would just like to know whether that's communicated to those art teachers at the beginning of the year, and they know that. In prior conversations, we've mentioned, I, for one, am not a big fan of instructional supply fees for students at the beginning of the year. I know that we had talked about that in depth, but I also know that after that conversation, both of my kids who are in art each paid a $25 art fee, which I'm fine with. Like I say, I am. It's not for my needs, but I do think about, because I do know families that have got like 6 kids and on fixed incomes, and that's just one subject alone. And in your unit schools, typically, I think art is taught pretty much at some point every grade, to my understanding. So that could be burdensome. So anyway, I just want to make sure that if we're budgeting for that we make the teachers a note where so they can modify or adjust however.
Okay.
So if that's the consensus, are we okay to send that to the voting meeting?
Okay. All right. Okay.
All right.
And then we'll put it on consent as well.
Next budget amendment.
Yes, please.
All right. Budget amendment 11068. This is a correction to the previous learning camp budget amendment. The incorrect revenue code was used, so we went back and corrected that, and that's what this amendment is for. It was prepared on December 8th, 2021. The description shows budget amendment to account for fiscal year 2022 learning camps transportation expenditures. It's redoing budget amendment 11034, and it had the incorrect revenue code. This corrects that revenue code, and all the correct supervisors have signed the budget amendment. Okay, 11069 diabetes grant. So this, once again, is very similar to the last budget amendment. We researched and found that we used the incorrect revenue code, so we are correcting that revenue code. You can see we're using the general purpose fund. The new revenue code is 46980, other state grants, and then 567 is for Project Diabetes specifically. We prepared it on December 8th, 2021. Total amounts $102,600, and the correct supervisors have approved the budget amendment. Okay. Budget Amendment 11070. This is a donation we have received from Stan McNabb of Columbia for the Teacher of the Year banquet. The donation is recommended to be used to buy supplies and decorations for that particular banquet. The revenue account is donations, and the expenditure account is regular instruction program, other supplies and materials. It was prepared on December 8th, 2021, and has been signed off by the appropriate supervisors. Okay. Budget Amendment 11071. This budget amendment is for architectural services for educational capital projects from the most recent borrowing. So this is your Santa Fe HVAC, your Santa Fe auxiliary gym and your new high school architectural fees. We are setting up the budget so that they can design those projects. This budget amendment was prepared on December 1st, 2021. The contributions revenue account has been amended because that's where the debt proceeds will be transferred into from the borrowing, and then the expenditure accounts are line itemed out by the cost of what it would be for the new high school estimated for architectural fees of $195,000 and the auxiliary gym for $30,000. These are preliminary numbers, and if this changes, we'll bring it back to you. The appropriate supervisors have signed the budget amendment.
Seeing no lights, we'll put it on consent.
Okay. Budget Amendment 11072. These are revised budgets for the Title ID, LEA, and Title IV program. So these are federal funds. E-Plan does not like the longevity pay object code, so we're moving money into that and using other salaries as well. So this revision is to increase funds for longevity pay and decrease the salary account for the transition specialist at the Middle Tennessee Juvenile Detention Center, who is paid from the Title ID LEA grant. The total cost of this budget amendment is $18,350. The Title IV change is to decrease funds from 72130-189 for teacher stipends to provide well-rounded activities for students after school, and moving those monies to 72130-399 for contracted specialists to provide instruction to those students after school, and the correct supervisors have signed the budget amendment.
Seeing no lights, we'll move it to consent.
All right. 11073, this is an insurance recovery. So we got a reimbursement from Safeware for a broken Chromebook at Mount Pleasant High School. So these are returning those funds. So we're putting the revenue code of insurance recovery. We're receiving those funds in of $229 and putting that back into the budget for CTE to go towards a purchase of a new Chromebook. The correct supervisors have approved the budget amendment.
Seeing no lights, we'll put it on consent.
All right. The next budget amendment is for the 21st century fiscal year 2022 and 2019 cohort application for the after-school programs at Highland Park Elementary and Mount Pleasant Elementary. These are federal funds. This is mainly for teacher salaries and pay. The total of the budget amendment is $3,764. So it's just to revise that federal program. And the correct supervisors have signed the budget amendment and are here to answer any questions.
Once again, seeing no lights, we'll put it on consent.
Okay. Budget Amendment 11075 for ESSER 2.0. And let me get zoomed in here. So these are needed to provide some more funds for Social Security, retirement, and Medicare on stipends provided that were paid in 141 for the Literacy Training Teacher Stipend Grant, and also to provide an additional $22,000 for iReady reading software for middle and high school, and to provide $22,000 for an online registration software, and an additional $4,352 for internet connectivity hotspots to help students access that. The federal program line items that are amended here are ESSER line items, and that's delineated by the subfund 935. The correct supervisors have signed the budget amendment and are here to answer questions.
Zoe.
Sure. I just noticed that it was coming from the guidance personnel. I'm assuming that's someone that we do not have staffed, and where is that impacted? Like, where are we?
It's actually, yeah, for 44,000 there.
Yeah, it looks like software was in replace of guidance personnel.
Renee is coming.
Okay, so you were asking the 44,000 where it came from?
Well, I mean, I'm assuming, because it says guidance personnel, I think that that would probably be a guidance teacher, someone of that nature. So if we have $44,000, I'm assuming that's not a position that we have filled. Is that correct? Or
Correct. It's a position that it's money that we still have in the account because the positions weren't filled. So we just reduced it because we're not going to spend it on that position.
But do we have a school that's lacking?
No.
Okay.
No, these are additional. These
Okay.
are additional positions.
Thank you.
Is that any other questions? Then we'll move it to, oh, excuse me, I didn't see your light on.
Sorry. Can you just review for us what was in ESSER 2.0 that we're not going to be funding if we approve this budget amendment?
Nothing. Everything that we've approved, everything you've approved is being funded. This has increased for iReady. You approved iReady at the previous board meeting, but the actual bid was 20,000 more than what we had in the line. So we had to add 22,000 in there to increase that so we could pay for that. So we pulled it out of a salary line where we hadn't hired someone yet. So we have a lot of positions that haven't been filled for class size, interventions, things like that. So we have money that we're still going to do. We still have positions posted, just we haven't filled them yet. So that's where that money came from. The other line that we had to increase was for the online registration, and that did not take away from anything. We just needed to pay that bill. So everything is still being purchased.
So when we did ESSER 2.0, you're saying that this is what we essentially approved. We just didn't have the right numbers when we got it presented to us the first time. Is that correct?
The original budget had iReady at 75,000. We thought we were going to piggyback on another school district's grant or their bid. It did not work because it wasn't identical to what we were doing, so we had to do a new bid, and when the new bid came in, it was 20,000 more.
And this is iReady reading, because when
Yes,
we've talked
ma'am.
about iReady in the past, I thought we've always talked about math.
This is iReady reading for middle school and high school.
Okay. I don't ever remember us talking about the reading aspect of it, so I guess I just missed that part of it. I mean, I'm glad that we're doing it. I think I've heard from teachers that they wanted that. Going back to the guidance, though, I know when we talked about ESSER, we had talked about a lot of the social and emotional issues that kids, so taking that money from guidance, how are we, do we still have the supports in place to be able to take care of kids at this point after everything that's gone on in COVID?
Yes. We have contracted for 3 additional SEL counselors. Those are still, we've got that contract in place. That is happening. What else? I think that was the only counselors we had in ESSER too. So all of that is happening. It's done.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say, because we're doing 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, I would really like to see maybe at a future meeting where we have kind of an update on what we've spent, just to kind of go through, because it kind of gets confusing what we did in 1, what we did in 2, what we did in 3, and for example, like with those counselors that we've, contracted with to find out what their work is and see if that's something, especially before we get into budget season, if that's stuff that we're going to need to continue on in future budgets, I think would be beneficial.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Lindsay.
To piggyback on what Ms. Parker, her request, I think it'd be good also to, ESSER 1, this is what the board approved as far as the application goes, and then here's, just like you said, we approved iReady at $75,000, but it came in more. But to show that here's what the board approved, here's what the initial application said, but here's what the actual accounting of it is, so we can see how those have changed. And then where we could also see if, money's left over out of ESSER 1 and money's left over out of ESSER 2. That I know we do budget amendments, but it's hard to keep all that together when we're piecemealing them together the way we do. So.
Yes, sir, and we are doing, the state's requiring us to do a lot of reporting right now on those, so we can share that information with you. I can tell you ESSER one is almost completely spent. I will tell you that we're almost completely spent with all of the things that you've approved, but we will share that.
I'm assuming that we can put this on consent? Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Laconin, great job.
So that was the end of the budget amendments. In addition, all of the purchases below that are in instruction, and I don't think operations has any above purchases above $25,000 tonight. But those do not require budget amendments. They're being taken from current fund sources. So that concludes budget amendments for tonight. Additionally, looking at our financials for this month, we are in a great place. We're $2.2 million in fund balance ahead of where we were last year, even with the things we're moving around. And part of that's a bad thing because that means that we're not filling positions, and everyone's aware of that we're trying to fill those. And, you know, when you have vacancies, you definitely have some funds that you'll earn in your budget. So there are also some things that we're doing good revenue-wise. We're exceeding expectations in a few line items, particularly sales tax. So if you want to look at those, one of my favorite reports is fund balance and cash board. It shows our liquidity, how we're doing cash-wise, and how we're doing in our fund balance month to month. So that's a good place to look. So that's all I have for tonight. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
No comments? Well, thank you. That'll goes to FYI, doesn't it? Not a voting thing, but it is nice to look at that budget and see those tall green lines and.
I have one last thing. So the 142 fund, if you look at those financials, they look a little different than they normally look, and that is because we changed the formatting. You can still tell every single department, every single object code. It's just a little bit different format, and we are going to go ahead and change the 141 to reflect that same look, and we'll make sure the colors stay in there, of course. I know Ms. Kinzer likes the colors, so. But if you see the expenditures, you can see it's just a little bit different. It doesn't have the entire GL code on every single line item, so it makes it a little easier. It says this department, here's all their line items. This department, here's all their line items. And we break it out by sub-fund for the 142 fund. You won't see that on the 141 fund because it only has what? How many sub-funds? We don't have any sub-funds. Yeah. 142, but we have no, 141. 141 we don't have. Yeah. Yeah. So we're required to report this to the comptroller's office by sub-fund, and so we're updating our financials to reflect that so that we're meeting compliance there. Yeah, and if you want to see the spend on ESSER, you know, their sub-fund is 935 and 936 and 931. So if you go to 931, you can see all of the expenditures and current budget for ESSER. Of course, that doesn't include any budget amendments you would have worked on tonight. Yeah, so just informing you of that. Also, I talked with Shifra and Rebecca about going forward. Right now, it doesn't have a comparison of last year's year-to-date for revenues and expenditures, and so we want to add that to the report so it shows, hey, this is where we're at compared to last year, and you can see that line by line next to each other. So,
Mr. Lindsay.
I just always like to bring this up while the news is good, but you know, we're still on that same pace. We're exceeding last year's sales tax revenue numbers by right at $300,000 every month. So a quarter of the way through the year, we've exceeded last year's by $1.2 million roughly, just to use round numbers. And just keep in mind that we budgeted again $16.8 million in sales tax. We took in right at $22 million last year, and we're outpacing that. You know, we keep our fingers crossed, but we could outpace that by $4 million by the time the year's over with. So things are always easier when you got money. So. than we do right now, so.
Anyone else? All right, we'll move on. Thank you, Mr. McConan. Instruction update,
I just got a brief,
okay.
good evening. I'd just like to give you a brief update. We have we completed EOC testing last week mostly. We're finishing up the last of that this week. This week, students in grades 2 through 8 and high school end of course are doing case assessments, their second assessment. So that'll be completed as we end this 9 weeks. Also, I'd just like to talk to you a little bit about some of the training opportunities we had for educators over the past month or so. We provided training for educational assistants on Sunday system, and that's our Tier 3 intervention piece, and they are involved a lot of times with helping with small groups. So we provided training for them on the 19th that morning. They came in, and we had the opportunity to train them. At the beginning of the year, we provided them training on 95% group, which is Tier 2. Both educational assistants are a vital part of helping us with that as we provide interventions. That was a part of the, as you know, on our typically on our professional development days, the district has half a day, so we did that portion in the morning, and schools have the afternoon session, so they have the opportunity to do specific professional development according to their school improvement plans. We continue to, we had MAP this month on last Tuesday. We had, our monthly, semi-monthly, aspiring administrators meeting. We finished that today here. We meet with aspiring administrators. These are people who we've interviewed and put in a pool, and they are working. They volunteered to come, and we work with them. Our staff provides professional development for them, just on what it would take to be an assistant principal or administrator. We also meet monthly with new principals. Like to thank Ms. Ventura. She was the session leader this time. She provided, all things special ed, and it's a good thing to remind, new principals about things they need to know with special ed. This month, I'd like to especially congratulate Dr. Lori Brown and her efforts. She went out and sought some grants, and she was able to obtain over $100,000 that can be used for STEM and career awareness. So that's a really good opportunity to be able to support those areas. We have, as you can see in the upcoming request of purchase, we're moving forward with some of our Grow Your Own initiatives. We have reached out to our educational assistants to see who's interested in this opportunity. We have about 63 educational assistants who are interested. 37 of them already have associate degrees. So we'll be providing more information. We're partnering with UT Southern to kind of offer that teacher assistant to teacher licensure program. So we're looking at, what does it cost? How can we help them? One of the big gates is they do have to pass a praxis before they can even enter. If they have some college credit, they do have to have a 2.5 before they can enter a teacher prep program. So we are working through that with those. As you know, we can do the most good with people that already have an associate's degree. We can help them to get finished. So that's a part of one of 2 or 3 initiatives that we talked about in ESSER 3.0 that we're doing to grow our own people to help replace some of our, vacancies now and upcoming vacancies.
Mr. Howe.
I got a few things here. So you mentioned EOCs. When do we anticipate those scores to be back?
And Dr. Miller says the 29th.
29th. And when does our grading period end?
January 7th.
Okay, so those grades will be used on those. Okay. And I expect we're going to do the same for the spring semester as well. Okay, because that hasn't happened traditionally. I just want to make sure that if we're going to use those EOCs as a grade, it needs to be fair and equitable for both semesters. Okay. The other thing is you mentioned the Grow Your Own. I'm excited about that. I think that's a great opportunity. So they have to pass a praxis before they can
enter a teacher ed program.
Okay.
Yes.
And what does that cost?
Praxis typically costs $99.
Okay.
Is what the average cost is. Yeah.
150, okay.
Mhm.
140 it says on the email.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's it.
Okay. I'm all for this. You have to have standards to get in. Get in college, you got to take an ACT classes. Several of those are free through our school system. I don't want this to be a barrier to. If we're trying to attract EAs who make $14,000 a year, $99 or $150, that could be a barrier, and I don't want that to be a barrier. And I'd like to make sure that it's not a barrier. I want to make sure we're getting qualified applicants, but I also want to make sure that we're getting everyone that we possibly can get. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. She was pointing out to me that Lipscomb charge $146 for the practice, but they're a private school. It may be different in public school, but she's just.
Well, there's different rates for different things too.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
It varies anywhere from $95 to about $160.
Mr. Lindsay.
I missed the numbers, but you said somewhere 60-something showed interest.
Yeah. 63 said they were interested in the program, and of that, about 37 already say they have an associate's degree.
In our initial ramp-up of this, what number were we going to, I know there's an application process, we were going to try to take a certain number?
We didn't, we said in our application process that we would try to provide salaries for 5 educational assistants to go, but in looking at, the state has changed the way we can help people to licensure, so there's probably some amendments we're going to have to bring back to you to say, hey, we can do more with this money to get people to licensure, and, as we talked about, that ESSER wouldn't resolve, even if someone with a 2-year degree is not going to matriculate by the time we get through with ESSER, don't know, so that depends on what they have, are they able to go, so we're going to have to look at how we can do the most good to, yes, meet our growing our own educational assistants, and also in the other areas that we talked to you about, trying to help those people that we need more middle grades endorsement, and also we've got teachers that have permits that at the end of this year we're going to have to let them go because we can't keep a permitted teacher according to the state requirements. So we're trying to use other programs to get them in job embedded so that way they can keep their license. If, principals, and others deem that they are worthy of keeping, that, they've had successful evaluations and we can keep them, then we're going to keep those folks on board. And because they'll have a job embedded license, they'll be able to continue working. That's gonna impact the number of people, because we don't want to tell someone we want you to sign up, we're gonna pay for your schooling, and then we don't have a job opportunity for them. I mean, I hope I'm pretty sure the way it's, sometimes we feel like we have job opportunities for everybody, but we want to make sure that we've got all that lined out so that we do the best good with the funds that we have in the time that we have.
Well, that was the point in my question, is that if we have 60-something interested people, and we're only shooting at 5 right now, I mean, we may need 35 by June. So I don't want us to box ourselves in, is what I'm getting at. If we're able, even if that means you guys come back and ask for more money from fund balance, whatever it may be, but there's no good answer to fixing the shortages we have. So if we have interested parties, I think we need to try to get a hold of those best we can. So I just personally, from my standpoint, if we have people interested, if that's something that can benefit Maury County schools, if we do 10, 15, whatever that number is, personally I'm willing to do that because I think those people are definitely needed. So.
If I can add something to that, the commissioner, and I know don't count your chickens until they hatch, but the commissioner has alerted us through my superintendent meeting on Friday, that she, and once again, we're not counting on it till it happens, but she's working with the U.S. Department of Ed, and one of the things that she has said she's going to be announcing very soon is in partnership with Tennessee, in partnership with them, is they're going to have the Grow Your Own no more as a grant procedure for districts. It's you apply to be in that network, and everybody that applies pretty much, she says, is going to be able to get into it, where we'll receive funds federally, hopefully, to start keeping that going, because I think as we have said over and over, it's just not a Murray County or a Tennessee problem, it's a national problem with getting enough teachers into the workforce because they're just not there. So this is hopefully going to be announced pretty soon, and then that way that can help us also take some more of those out of that pool and be able to get more teachers that are already vested in Murray County as teachers now. The only problem that it does start to make is backfilling those roles in the classified place. But it will also, I think, in the long run, make it a much more attractive place to work as a classified if we have that sell point.
Mr. Moore.
Thank you. And if I could expand on it a little bit too, I think we all realize that we're looking at both getting and retaining teachers is going to be a different landscape as we move ahead. I would make sure. I would ask that you guys, and it sounds like you're starting to do some of that. I get uncomfortable when we start talking about maybe, and we hope they'll come through on stuff. I feel like, and actually Ms. Parker, I think, has been saying this for a couple of years about being very intentional about how we recruit and all aspects of that. So I would think, because I love adding things to y'all's plate to do, I think as a district we probably ought to start having a much more intentional discussion about that full discussion about recruiting, about which funds of these are going to be. And you bring up the fact that if we're trying to entice, let's just say we've got 60 people that are possibly interested in these programs that would bring them in, and then I think it might be realistic of us to go ahead and start looking at what kind of funds would be required to employ those people if we draw them in, because and that may mean you guys come to us and we start talking about what that costs and what those real numbers are, because I think, because this will go back into something that we've talked about when we've had, let's just say we've had poor performing teachers in our district in the past. I know every district has that as well. Some of these up and coming people that are that are being very, they're really trying to get into this system. They may be the people that could replace some of those that are just not performing well here, just to be blunt. So I would hate for us to say, come join us, and like, oh, well, by the way, we don't have anything for you. That may mean we're in a position we've overemployed for a moment. I don't think that's really going to be an issue, but what I mean is I think we really ought to have a very intentional discussion that goes everywhere from recruiting, retention, what that looks like, more than just the kind of let's just see who shows up when the time comes around. Because I know historically that's what we've done.
And I agree with you 100%. Ms. Parker and I, we did have a conversation about that, and she enlightened me on a lot of avenues that we should be using that y'all have discussed before. And we're trying to be very intentional on our recruiting. It is something now. It's not just recruiting because we need people. It's competitive recruiting to make sure.
No, I agree.
We're offering.
And I think what that relays into as well is going to be it's going to have to be a budgetary discussion. There's going to have to be some annual funds that we may need to spend on that. I think there's going to be dividends if we spend that smartly, but I think it can't just be, do we have money left over at the end of the day to try to figure out how to do this? And it can't just be someone had one idea of one way to recruit this one thing, and if that didn't pan out, oh well. I think we're well past that, and we're into a thing where we have to be very intentional, maybe even bring in some experts on recruiting on how we create a game plan and a strategy for how we recruit, what that looks like, and what funding is required for us to do that.
Yes, sir. And we will try to bring back what we're doing, because what I'm hearing you say is that you need basically a per person cost to get a degree to teach, and we'll try to get some of those numbers to the first of your conversation, so we can say, this is how much money we need to get X amount of people certified, so we have a real number that we can work with.
Mr. Lindsay.
I know we're kind of getting off topic a little bit, but personally I think it's I know you guys are dealing with it every day, but it's a big topic trying to figure out not only recruitment but retainage as well. And my question, as far as that goes, I know with the Grow Your Own program, we're going to have some type of contract that you're going to work for us for a number of years. Is it, and this may be a legal question, but is it possible from a retainage standpoint? Let's say we offered a $5,000 bonus, but with that, you sign a contract that you'll stay with us for 5 years, and if you leave before that time, that money's due back to Maury County Schools. And I'm just throwing anything out, trying to figure out, a way to, because the teacher shortage is real. It's not going to get any better. So as Mr. Hickman said, it's going to be competitive. So not only are we going to have to fight and to get new people in, we're going to have to fight to keep our own people. And anything I think we could do, and I think we're going to have to think outside the box to try to keep instructors in the classrooms. But just an idea, like, I don't know whether it's even legal or not, but
it would be. We could do that.
Ms. Parker.
I'm going to piggyback on what Mr. Lindsay's asking about, and that is the contract. But, before we start paying out funds for people to go to school, do we have a clear picture from you and working with Jake as far as, what the obligations are from our end and on their end for this program? And is that something that we've got to approve as a board?
You give us direction. I mean, what I envision is that the teacher would sign a promissory note. I mean, basically for the amount of the services being advanced, and as long as they work whatever time you dictate, then that would be forgiven. But something short of that would be a prorated payback.
Is that something that they need to get with you, and then y'all will put that on the agenda for us to approve as a part of this program?
If that's something you're looking at, then yes. I mean,
Yes.
We can certainly work that out.
Yeah, I'll work with Jake. I've already been working on some of this, and I'll get with him and finalize that. So yeah.
Okay. Moving on then, we're ready for instructional bids, low bids, and purchases. The first one is band instruments.
So I think Mr. Ritchie's here. If you got any questions, that is the funds in ESSER 2 that you approved, I think, last month, and we've gotten those bids back, and we're ready to purchase those band instruments.
Okay, Ms. Irvin.
Hey, Mr. Ritchie, I just have a question, just because the whole uniform thing kind of brought to light. Do we have a plan, or is there some kind of way we know that we're being equitable? Are those being equally distributed, or are they just going to like one school or another? I just want to make sure we're giving, fair equity in that to our
Yes,
high
ma'am.
schools. We are, okay.
Yes, ma'am. I'll briefly explain the process
Thank
for that.
you.
I included a conversation with Mount Pleasant High School, Columbia Central High School, and Spring Hill High School. It was a collaborative effort in looking at all the bids, unanimous agreement on which one to go with. So, open policy on all of that, full disclosure.
But everybody's getting a piece of the pie, basically.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yes,
that's all. I just
yes.
want to make sure, okay.
Yes.
You want it? Can we put that on consent then? Consent? All right, moving on. Dell laptops for CTE. Any questions? Yes. All right, then we'll move it to consent. The tuition for teacher candidates at Lipscomb.
This is one of the parts of the ESSER 2.0, ESSER 3, I'm sorry. One of those portions of that we would use under Grow Your Own. We're seeking, as you know, we have a lot of elementary educators that are in our middle schools, and we're seeking to provide opportunities to them to get middle school certified.
Okay.
And Dr. Pennell was the lead on that, so if you got additional questions, you can, she's here to answer those.
Ms. Irvin.
Sorry, I'm on the mic so much tonight, but my only question is, was Lipscomb our only or best financial avenue? I know typically, state schools are a little bit cheaper than private, so.
Actually, they were the school that provided that endorsement. We checked into MTSU. They did not provide a middle level endorsement at all.
Earlier you mentioned UT Southern as a partner.
They provide the secondary endorsement is what, so a middle level endorsement they don't specifically imply.
So I guess along with the Ms. Irvin's question, that was it just MTSU and Lipscomb the only two schools that we looked into, or?
They were the two that we looked into. A middle level endorsement is a specialized endorsement, basically because the typical endorsement is going to be K-5, 6, K-5 or K-6, or it's going to be 6-12 or 7-12, and so we find this gap in middle schools. It's a little bit unusual, so most schools do not offer that endorsement. It's something that Lipscomb is actually specialized in and priced at a very reasonable price, actually, for people to earn, but MTSU didn't offer it at all. So those were the two that we looked at.
But those were the only two we looked at.
Correct.
No other lights. Can we move to consent? Yes. Okay. All right. The next one is a request to continue Elevate K-12 services.
So we're asking to continue Elevate specifically at Central and adding one class at Culleoka for another 9 weeks. That should be, for the next semester. We have added some teachers at Central. We still want to have that instruction there and have the those new teachers that are coming. They're not coming to the second semester, coming till January. So we want to have some transition there where we still have the instruction there. Get that new instructor on board. You know, one of them is one of the permitted teachers that we'll have to apply for a permit. So it would be nice to have. It would be great. It's going to be, that Elevate teacher has already been working with those students. All those students at Central specifically are in year-long courses, so they've already been working with those kids. So that'll be a good transition for that 9 weeks to make sure that we get the students on track. That if we need to continue it, we can, but we didn't want to carry it out, to the end of the year. We want to see that, maybe we may even get other potential recruits in between now and Christmas, but we tried to look at what we had already recruited, what we know we're going to hire, and, we decided that we still need to go another 9 weeks in order to make sure that those classes had qualified instructors and that we continue that instruction.
Mr. Moore.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. Even though we're adding one at another school, primarily what you're using this for is for the transition piece right now. So, I mean, I take it the goal is to continue, as the board's kind of made it clear, we would like to move back to a traditional classroom setting with a teacher. Okay. I mean, I do appreciate this. This has been a difficult one. I know we've kind of gone round and round on this. I'm still not sure how I feel about this. I will say, though, using it as a transition piece, I appreciate that. I appreciate, for the kids' sakes, that it's not going to be just yet again they're going to walk into a classroom and not know what's going on. If this will help them to have a better transition as they move into an actual classroom teacher and not just have it dropped in their laps, I can appreciate this part of it then.
Sorry. I know we've had some issues with Elevate being new, and obviously with it starting at Culleoka, if this is approved, what have we learned from our experience at Central so that we can make sure that we don't have the same issues go on at Culleoka?
So, one of the things we know is consistency in the person that's in the classroom, i.e. the classroom coordinator or whoever's trained to be there. So trying to train multiple people to make sure that we have a person in there that knows the process to make sure the students are ready and knows how to troubleshoot. We've done
So do you already have those people
yes,
identified
yes.
at Culleoka?
I mean, we've had technology on board
training?
that's there now checking in at the beginning of classes. to make sure that things are going okay. Are there going to be glitches sometimes? As we have glitches with the internet, there are going to be glitches sometimes, but we're trying to eliminate all that so that we're ready to go. And because we've already had these classes at Central, we can apply the same principle to Culleoka. For example, Culleoka has a 120-day contract person who's actually going to be in that class with that English class. So that will definitely help. That person will be still allowed to intervene while serving kind of that classroom coordinator. And even we intend to hire a classroom coordinator for that class, so that person will be able to provide additional assistance as an interventionist while the instruction's going on and be able to do that. So that'll be really, an extra help, because we know those kids at Culleoka especially, they had varied instruction this first semester, and they're going to need additional assistance.
So at Culleoka, you're going to have Elevate teacher,
classroom coordinator,
a classroom coordinator, and a 120-day contract.
Yeah, yes. Because I mean, they're
compare that to Central. Tell me what you got at Central.
Well, we
talked about equity the last time.
I mean, if we have 120-day contract math persons available, they did hire. I think Mr. Edie's here. We hired a 120-day contract person at Central that's going to work the rest of the year to be 120 in those math classes. We've got one Elevate classroom coordinator on board. There's one in the pipeline, right, Mr. Edie? And we've hired a math teacher that's coming. He's already on board coming January 4th. Yeah, so he should be here next year. So that's why we want that trend.
So tell me what those classes at Central are going to look like.
So you'll have that. You'll have
Elevate in 4 classes.
Yes.
You'll have a math teacher that's been hired.
You'll have You'll have a math teacher in one of them. You'll have, because it's a 120-day, we can flex their schedule. So I mean, it just depends on how many. We will look at their schedule so that interventionist could even be between both classes and help to provide intervention. But you'll always have the classroom coordinator there.
So we have classroom coordinators then for all these positions. For all these classes that you're asking for.
We don't have one. We still need to hire one. Well, because of Culleoka, and one more at Central, we'll still need to post another one.
Okay, so you still need 2 additional classroom coordinators.
Right.
Because I'll just say that the last time that we went through this process, I remember having the conversation and saying, Elevate don't work if we don't have classroom coordinators, essentially.
Right.
I mean, I think there was a delay in starting it at Central, and so that's my whole thing, is I'm just trying to make sure that we're prepared, because obviously, we're a few days from everybody pretty much shutting down and going home for the holidays. January 4th, though, when those kids come back, I just want to make sure that we're prepared on our end to have somebody in there trained on Elevate and ready to go, because like you said, if there's been varied instruction at Culleoka, those kids don't need to start January 4th and not have some consistency going forward. And it sounds like even at Central, even after an extra 9+ weeks of this, we're still not ready to go January 4th right now. Is that fair?
Well, we have some inconsistencies in classroom coordinators, which is why we're asking you to raise the salary. The next item, we're asking you to raise that starting salary to $15 an hour. To hopefully we can keep the people that we got, and we can also attract others. And so that we want to be redundant in consistency. I mean, we asked you to hire 5, and we've only hired 3. So if we could hire more, it'd be great. So that way we'd have an extra that would be on board to be able to so that if we have a sub or we have things like that, I think Mr. Edie and them have done a good job of even training their permanent sub. So if they have those issues, the permanent sub is able to go in there and do that. But we want to have some redundancy so that, like you said, that doesn't happen. The class is ready to go every time. We know what to do, and we have consistency there with the instruction when they get ready to come on.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no lights, shall we put it on consent? Okay.
If we're going to increase the classroom coordinator part.
Well, let's go on and talk about it then. Next is request an increase in starting pay for classroom coordinators. So that does kinda go together, doesn't it?
Yeah, so we're asking you to increase the pay. That would, put them basically at the end of the scale of educational assistant, close to the end. So hopefully we can attract, so we can compete with other places at a starting salary where we can get some consistency, I hope. Because, we had one that didn't come once we quoted the salary to him. So we're hoping that, this increased salary will give them, will attract, the one we'll have to post for Kalioka and the additional ones that we already have out there. And the ones that are already working, we'll be able to raise their salary.
So what are we raising? What is the amount? There's nothing on.
Nothing.
Mr. Laconin, do you want to comment on the classroom? We talked about the budget that we wouldn't.
There's not a budget amendment for it because we haven't been able to hire anyone. So we have the funds in the budget, but I don't upload the attachments for it, but or what the pay is changing to.
Yeah, that's my question. Is just what we're increasing it to.
Right. So I get that from their office.
Starting pay for educational assistant is like $10.74.
Oh my gosh.
Is that right, Jennifer? Yeah, $10.25, and so we want to, get that range to where it's similar, competing with, we'll be able to compete with similar wages across the county.
Yeah, you're competing with McDonald's. That's what they pay. Just so, just a comment. I definitely think, I agree we need to do something to increase it, but we've got to attract them. I don't know if that's enough, but Ms. Lindsay.
So I'll let Mr. Edie talk because I'm going to go a different direction here.
Good evening, everyone. The salary is a big issue with the people who have we've interviewed. We've had a lot of people apply, and then when we get to interviewing them and they ask the amount, you're right, they can make more in other places. Nothing wrong with McDonald's or Burger King, but that's where, or these other businesses here, they're getting, and we're losing. I lost a teacher that, a coordinator that she was all aboard for it, but just could not hack that. Matter of fact, she says, I will be losing money from what my part-time job I have right now.
So what pay are they looking for? Is $15 an hour going to be enough for you to attract? Because in my opinion, this Elevate program I think is a good stopgap for what we have. But if $15 isn't going to get you somebody in the door, then we're wasting money on Elevate because you have to have a classroom
I'd love to be
coordinator.
able to give out 2021. But if you want to be competitive,
we're talking about for 3 weeks. I mean for 39
to be
weeks,
competitive, you're gonna have to be $15, $16, $17 an hour.
Okay.
But I'm with her. It's short term though. It's not. But maybe January. So I think we need to look at least 17.
And that will get us more people who do interview or do come in we like and we want to offer, and then once they go through the HR process and they hear the salary or whatever, that will be more enticing to them.
Ms. Irvin.
The only thing I want to ask, and I'm all for paying these people more money, we've got to get good quality people in, but I also don't want to turn around and insult our teachers, especially our starting teachers. And I really would like to think about that, because if they're, you know what I mean, like our pay grade for starting teachers is, well, that's true, but, that's true, I know. I know, like I say, I can hear that now. Well, they're getting paid at, $17 an hour, and I'm having to do this, and this, and then, again, and I know everything, like you said, to bring in one, you can also disgruntle others, and I get that, but I don't know. Like you say, I think as our cost of living has dramatically increased, we're going to have to really look at wages all across the board. because things have significantly changed in the last year, it seems.
Mr. Howe?
Well, and again, it's a temporary position. We say it's temporary. It may last 3 weeks. It may last to the end of this next semester. We don't really know. We can't predict the pipeline, or else we wouldn't be in this situation. Obviously, you're paying more than a regular EA because this is an emergency situation. We're currently paying money to use something that we're not really getting to use. So we've got to attract those people. And if it takes $17 an hour to do it, I don't know why we didn't start there to begin with. Like, I don't know why we would say, oh, it's $10 an hour. We can't get anyone to work for $10 an hour. I don't think anybody can get anybody to work $10 an hour, unless it's my 5-year-old son or something like that might do that. But so, I mean, I don't know why we didn't start at a fair market rate to begin with. And we could have already had these positions filled, I don't know, in November maybe. I don't know. That's just my thought. I don't know why we start low, and here we are a month later, 2 months later, sitting here waiting till January for our voting meeting to happen. So
I'm not sure. I think Mr. Lindsay was next, and then you, Mr. Sims.
Mr. Art, how far along are we with the salary study? Have you got any feedback from that yet?
Yes, I had emailed them today, I think it was. I've emailed them a couple times this week. I don't know. What are we on, Tuesday? Anyways, we've gotten them all of the job descriptions as far as I know. I've emailed them again actually before the board meeting started just to make sure. I've talked with them last week. Me and Melinda in my office have been working with them, and we're still on track for the end of the year, very 1st of January is what they have promised me. So I've literally emailed them right before the meeting. It's like, my board and superintendent are eagerly awaiting the results of this salary study. So as far as I know, and I have emailed them diligently to make sure that we've given them everything that they need. They had run into a couple districts that did not, what they do is they send out a survey to all the other districts that we wanted to compare ourselves to. So there were 2 districts that were pretty important, I feel like, for the salary study that could not answer their survey. So they're trying to go about different ways of maybe getting some of that information on specifically for the classified staff. We were able to get TEA was able to help us out getting our licensed staff, and a lot of that's already online. But some of the classified positions, they're having a little bit more difficulty getting some of the districts to give them that information. So,
and I just asked that question because I don't want to get into the business of picking certain groups of people, and we have. But trying to keep that to a minimum. But I could see that if we raise classroom coordinators' pay up, we're going to have a lot of EAs just apply for those positions, and now we're going to have vacancies in the EAs. So it would be great if we could, if we knew what or close to what is going to be the recommendation for EAs on that study. I would be willing to look at it as a whole right now that, hey, we move. I mean, I'm not very smart, and that's obvious, but I know they're going to bring back that we got to pay EAs more than $10.29 an hour. So I'd be willing to do that now, just to have some consistency, because I think as we solve one problem, we create another one, and that may just be the nature of the beast, but just personally, I'd be willing to. I said a while ago, we have money. Having money solves a lot of problems. We could do some things. We could at least look at some things like that right now, maybe to minimize the problems that we're causing. And I'm saying we. It's this board doing it, but that's where we are, because we've got to make some of these decisions just to get some of these positions filled. So if there was any way they could give you a hint on that, I'd be willing to listen, and maybe we take care, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But
can I just interject? I don't think that the coordinators will get benefits. I think EAs do. so that might.
They would
Oh,
be
they would get benefits?
Yeah, they'll be a full-time employee, so they would have benefits.
Oh, wow. Well, Mr. Sims was next, and then Mr.
Did staff have a recommendation on, I mean, we had it on our agenda for just request increase starting pay. Had y'all come up with a number that you felt like did you have a number?
And I apologize. I said $15 an hour. I don't know why I didn't land on there, but I mean, we were trying to look at what's competitive with the, across the counties where we wanted to start at, and it was more than what an educational assistant makes. But certainly I understand if we that's what we proposed, 15. But, I talked with Mr. Lukonen to say, hey, if this was the range, could we, would we need to come and do a budget amendment first to be able to do this? And we thought that we didn't have to do a budget amendment. We could stay within the existing, because we hadn't hired people, that we could stand it if we hired somebody. So that's where we were. And I mean, I don't know at this point that even if we raise it to that much, I mean, we can always come back to you at the quarter and look at it and at the semester and say, hey, we got to continue this to the end of the year. We don't have a candidate here. Certainly, it will be less because we've hired some licensed people, but and then we'll be able to adjust. We'll drop off some of those contracts as we go along, and then we still may be able to carry that on to the end of the year.
Well, I'll just say I don't like a knee-jerk. Let's just do $17 an hour, just pulling it out of the air. I mean, I would say a lot of people in Mr. Perryman's department may not even make $17 an hour, and we're just starting some out at that. I think we need to think about it a little more than just pulling numbers out of the air.
Mr. Hamilton, and it was a knee jerk on my part. I was just saying whatever, raise it, but Mr. Hamilton.
So, it's a temporary position. If I have a current job as an EA from August to May, I know I've got a job, and it may be dealing with the teachers or the student that I want to deal with. I would kind of I could make more money short, for 3 weeks or for 9 weeks by doing this position, but that doesn't mean, I'll probably be able to go back to being an EA. It may not be where I was at. So, I mean, and as far as Mr. Perryman's department, absolutely. I think probably everyone in that department deserves $25 an hour. But it's not a temporary job. It's a permanent. They know, especially in his department, they're working 365. They're constantly going. They have a guaranteed job. As far as it being a knee-jerk reaction, maybe it is. But when I can physically see a sign at Burger King saying $15 an hour with a $3,000 sign-on bonus, that tells me what the market's bearing. That's a market rate. It may not be the federal minimum wage, but for our area, it is probably close to the minimum wage. You've had Mr. Edie tell you he's had numerous applicants that are ready to go, gung-ho for it, and then you say $10 an hour, and they're like, nope, bye. So you can call it a knee-jerk reaction, but I think it's pretty. I think the evidence is clear. It's there, and that $15 an hour is probably just a starting point. We probably should have evaluated this a long time ago.
Ms. Parker.
I couldn't agree with Mr. Howell more. I think I've been communicating with parents who has had a kid in one of these classes whose child has not had algebra for an entire semester. And so if we have to pay $2 more an hour for a month, 2 months, 3 months, I really don't care. That is money well spent to me, because the actual cost of Elevate is way more than what we're going to end up paying these people. But we can't do Elevate if we don't have these people. So I asked the question to Mr. Edie, because I do want to know. I want to know what the market demands. And if he's saying he needs $17 an hour, then why would we ask him to go to a gunfight with a knife? Like, that just doesn't make any sense. Let's give him what he needs so these kids have a chance to, quite frankly, cram in a year-long class in in a semester. That to me is an even heavier ask that we're asking of Elevate and of these students. The other concern, I will just be honest, is do we need to have a special session about this? Because I would hope that we've got classroom coordinators in place on January 4th. We're not supposed to be voting on this until January 4th. So how are we going to have a classroom coordinator hired, trained, ready to go on January 4th if we don't have something approved by this board? Again, this stuff should have been brought to us. It should have been brought to us at the beginning in October. We should have set it at a higher rate. That was our fault. We knew it was an issue because we still didn't have it going in the beginning of November. Now we're in December, and we still don't have it running flawlessly. And we're making these kids suffer, and that really bothers me. So I'm happy to meet before January 4th, but I just want to make sure that Culleoka has their classroom coordinator in place, and I want to make sure Central has their classroom coordinator in place. And I don't want to get any more emails that we don't have, that these kids are not getting what they need from Elevate. We've already done them a huge disservice not having a teacher in there for them. Personally, I'd rather take somebody out of Central office that knows how to teach math and put them in there to teach math at this point. That's really how serious I think this is. I cannot wait to see what Algebra 1 test scores are at Central High School for end-of-course tests. Can't wait to see what that is. And considering that Algebra 1 builds on Algebra 2 and geometry, we're setting that school up for failure. So $2 more, $3 more for a month, 2 months, 3 months, I don't know how long it is. It is a drop in the bucket for what we've done to these kids.
Okay, Mr. Moore.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm going to go on kind of a tangent to go with that, because as far as I'm concerned, I'll approve whatever you guys are recommending on this just to get the needs met. But I think Ms. Parker brings up the point that as I talked to, and again, I talked to one of the parents at Central that was dealing with this as well, and I don't know whether it gets lost in all of us talking about this program or that program, but I too I'm really worried, because I started to sit down and think about a child that's had 3 different ways of being taught over this year. A substitute, a permanent teacher that left, a substitute, and then maybe not even an Elevate classroom coordinator at that point, or maybe technology issues. And if I go back to what our vision and mission is for the district, I'm having to, is anybody sitting back and going, okay, what are these kids, what have we done so far, and how do we make sure they're going to be where they need to be? Is someone doing that? Do we have a plan for that, or are we even addressing that? Because sometimes I worry that gets lost in all of us talking about this program or that program or whatever else. Are we making sure that the kids that have not had and I'll expand this into other classrooms. I know we've had other issues where we've had substitutes, where we've had turnover in various classrooms. We've had to redo schedules to blend classes together because somebody leaves. Is somebody actively looking at those situations and going, hey, what have we missed here? And how do we make sure that by the end of this school year that those children have what they need?
We have, and that's part of the Elevate program, is it pre-tests them to see what their losses are, and it goes back and makes sure to capture those, and it scaffolds as it builds through the end of the year to make sure they're getting it all.
I appreciate that. I'm not sure if that's really encompassing what our duty is as a district to make sure that kid walks out of the door in May with what we said they needed to have.
Correct.
So again, I don't know if I'm not really giving you an answer right now. I'm worried we're missing that, and I would like to see you guys make sure there's some intentional thought into what does that look like. Because I know Ms. Parker's saying that. If they've already gone an entire first half of the year with almost no education, and I'm being a little dramatic with that. I get it. But, according to some parents that have been in these situations, that's a good point. Has Elevate said that these children are behind to that level? Do you guys have reports showing that?
Elevate's done assessments. We also, we have our case assessments that are, showing where kids are, and we're using that data together with what the Elevate pretest done to kind of go back and retailor that instruction for those students. As you also know, we had funds in ESSER for after school. We we're trying to provide more opportunities for those kids to get after-school assistance, so that we can target those students that are behind, and are trying to give them extra help. So we're trying to, as we identify those kids, talking to the parents, talking to the students, providing those opportunities for after-school remediation, so that we can catch them up. I mean, we'll also be looking at summer school again, as we did, this past year, looking at, tracking those students for summer school and trying to get those.
I would just want to interject on that too. I know we're back to talking about programs. I just want to make sure we don't forget the individual child here. And I appreciate that, but I just want to make sure, because if I'm trying to put myself in the seat of one of those parents, they don't care about programs. They're worried that they're trying, because again, one of the parents that I had heard from was, they're trying to figure out how they're going to pay for, or be paying for tutors because of a ball we dropped. I mean, I'm just being blunt. I mean, nobody intentionally did that. But I mean, I guess that's what I want to make sure is through these discussions, we don't get lost in programs and talking about ESSER funds and summer school or some other program. There's a child that isn't getting what we said we would give them, and how do we make sure we rectify that on an individual level, not just a program level.
May I just interject, Mr. Lindsay? I'll get to you just a second, and we kind of need to wind this. I want to know how we're going to. I do think we support continuing Elevate, but we can't really vote. I mean, we really can't put that on consent unless we know what you're proposing. And she's brought out that you can't hire anybody until we vote on it, correct? So it seems to me that we will have to have some kind of yes.
They can put it out, they just can't hire it. And at the same time, yes, they'll have to calculate a rate. But we've had 5 positions that you all approved as classroom coordinators to hire and go. We've had 1 on and off. So the funding is there if you would like to go up to that 17. So
without having to have a call special or anything, just huh?
And
we don't set the rate. You all should.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And technically, and I think we might need Jake's help here, but I think the only pay scale that the school board has to see and vote on is the teacher pay scale. So this being a different position, a classroom coordinator position, and I think the teacher pay scale is in state law, but none of the other ones are, as far as I know.
Okay.
And if budget was needed, it would have to come here. So if it gets to the point where, okay, we've hired all 5 of them and they're all there and they're there longer than expected, we need to come back to you.
With a budget issue then. Mr. Lindsay, I'll let you wind us up here.
With these just being temporary positions, I don't know how we get anybody hired anyways, no matter what we pay. I mean, if we paid $50 an hour, right? I don't. There's some number there where you would get somebody, but I just pulled up real quick between just on the website right now between special ed assistants and general ed assistants. I counted. If I told you a while ago I wasn't very smart, so I could have miscounted, but I think I counted 30 openings in assistants. Could we not piggyback somehow and look at this holistically and tell these people that, hey, we're hiring you as a classroom coordinator / assistant somehow, and then we're at least, I mean, we're guaranteeing them a full-time job. We may not be guaranteeing them what that job is, but.
Right, and I think that was the idea of why they were starting them at the educational assistant pay range, was with the classroom coordinator in the hope that we would hire the teachers, then they could shift into an educational assistant role and it would still be at the same pay rate. So this would be different if they were going to switch into an educational assistant role from a classroom coordinator. That pay scale is different, so we'd have to go, if we were going to switch them into a lower paying job at that time, or if we would keep them at the rate that they were at, but then change them into an educational assistant. So that was the reasoning as behind why it started at that pay range, is if these were personnel who would then be switched into a different job once a teacher was hired and we didn't need the classroom coordinator anymore.
Well, I catch heat for a lot of decisions I make up here, and this is one I'm willing to take whatever heat comes from it. But I've said it before, paying someone $10.29 an hour is criminal, and I would like to see at our next voting meeting, I would just like to see the numbers that if we moved all educational assistants and classroom coordinators to $15 an hour. I'd like to see what that would look like. And I know I'm getting the cart before the horse with the salary study and all that. I get it, but I would just like to see what those numbers look like.
Okay.
And just clarification so that when I bring it is, you want us to compare, okay, at this point in the year, how much more would it cost to increase their pay? Would we have enough budget to make it if we did that in those particular EA line items? And are you talking about regular and sped EA because we just changed sped EA?
Just regular.
Okay.
Okay, my assumption here then is that it's pretty much been our consensus that we want to continue to elevate. All you're asking us is for the permission to raise their salary. And I don't think anybody here objects to that. We may have different opinions on what that could be. That's going to be your decision to make. So we don't have to technically vote on it, the salary-wise. We can put it on consent that we do approve both of these actions, correct? Is that okay? Okay, no? Ms. Parker?
Well, to elevate,
We have to extend that in January. So that's to stay on consent.
So that can stay on consent.
Mhm.
All right, so what about the increase, though? Yeah, okay. Then you don't even have to ask us. Do it.
But can I just say, I would like a report, like, January 1st, like, if we got people that are going to be able to start on January 4th. I mean, you guys could, or sooner, but, and that they're trained January 4th. That's what I want to know.
Okay. All right, we're going to move on then. School calendar. Do you need water, Mr. Gaines? You're talking a lot.
I got Crystal. It's sweet tea though. So, good evening again. Just to talk about, we normally in December we bring 2 years worth of calendars to you, 23, 24, 24, the next subsequent year. This year we received a letter from the Election Commission asking us to consider changing our days in the fall. We're asking us to close on the general election day and the election day in November. So we did look at making adjustments because you've already approved that calendar. So we did making adjustments to the instructional days. We proposed some options there for you to consider. And I also put the law there because as we were doing this, we received a call from, I guess, the chairman of the commission, and he talked about the law as to that we need to do that, and I just wanted to let you know, we informed him that, yes, we got it, we were working on it, but because the calendar was already approved by you, and it does involve in changing instructional days, that we had to bring it back to you. So you have some options there to be considered. They're not there. Wait a minute, I got to bring them up too so I can see them. I'm sorry. So option A starts us later in the week and just pushes our PD days. It pushes our start to a later date. We don't start to the 2nd, but it honors having that extra day, that day off after we start. Typically, sometimes some adjustments are made in schedules, especially in high school, and we come back. The downside of that is you come back on a Friday. In November, basically, we just in November, we switched the PD day from the 19th to that election day. When I talked with the Election Commission chairman, he didn't, they didn't have a preference. They said, they prefer we not have students there. So that was what we were trying to meet. They said in the future they would like for the board to consider closing schools because, they just said in general, a lot of the people that work the polls are starting to retire, and they've always said teachers are good people to work polls, and they would like to recruit some others, but they said in the future if we could consider that. So option A again kind of keeps the calendar the same as we had. Option B gives us those 2 days there where we're meeting the fourth requirement of being kids not being at school, but it kind of just it's a longer weekend. So those would be PD days. They're not days where school is closed. So what we're doing is just moving our admin PD days around some in both options.
Ms. Irvin.
So from these two options, if you want to know preferences, I personally prefer, I suppose, option A because the first week of August on option A, we've got Monday and Tuesday as a professional development appears. The students go on Wednesday, they're off on Thursday, and then they return on Friday. To me, that seems to flow much better for students and families than option B, which has them come in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then off Thursday, Friday. I know, personally, there's a lot of high schoolers who have summer jobs and whatnot, and, just to bring them to start, I think that's a lot of, and too, from a teacher's perspective, you get them going just to stop. I'd rather it be, I can appreciate them coming one day, letting the teachers get to know the personalities and maybe making adjustments accordingly, but I think to go 3 days and then be off 2 days, to me, in my opinion, does not make a lot of sense. I know we talked about this a little bit when we looked at the calendar last time. I just, again, to express my thoughts, which are probably not worth much. I know last time I did ask about the March 13th professional development. I do understand that from what I was told last time that we like to have professional development maybe once every 9 weeks, and I do get that. But I do also understand that that's taken away a potential instructional day that kids could have in a time that's kind of crunch time before testing. So my personal opinion is I'm not a fan of that day. I'd like for it to be an instructional day instead of a teacher in service. I personally think that can be made up at the end of the year or elsewhere. And also, and the reason why I point that out is looking at this calendar, A or B, I believe, but I think I'm looking at B now. On B's option, Monday and Tuesday of May 22nd, May 23rd, the kids are returning to school. From my experiences, a lot of times those are very unproductive days. And I feel like if we could use March 13th as an instructional day, bump in service back to the end of the year. And then even another thought of mine, which again is probably not worth much, but instead of taking the whole last week of March off for spring break, so they're off a whole week, the whole last week of March, then they come back the following week, the first week of April, go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then they're off again Friday for Good Friday, which I appreciate. To me, it would just make more sense to just have them have spring break that first week of April and only have 4 days, and that would give us one less at the end of the year. Because I know, at my kids' school, just because I was very aware, this past year when they ended, it was like a ghost town that last day when they showed up on Monday. Half the kids don't come. I feel like it's a wasted day, so I just wanted to reflect my thoughts on that.
Mr. Moore.
So to answer Ms. Irwin, your question about where we plan spring break, we try to work with the community around the Mule Day and try to because it's so difficult for us to have school at Central and Baker and those schools, almost anywhere. So we try to coincide our spring break around the Mule Day celebration.
I found my thoughts
Okay, Mr. Moore.
I know you said normally this is time. Are we going to dive into the next 2 years worth? Is that next year? When does that come back around then?
I'm gonna bring you the next year's calendar, and we've surveyed people, and the majority of people want to keep the calendars the same.
Do they though? Do they really?
Yeah. Well,
who are these people that are surveyed?
The only feedback we heard from people that had negative feedback wanted us to start the school year earlier, or start the school year later. But as we look at, we still have got to offer a summer school for the next 2 years by legislative. So the later we start, the less opportunities for that Memorial Day break that we've got to get into providing summer school. So we're trying to stay where we are, at least for the next 2 years, so we can meet that legislative requirement of being able to provide that summer school session. And we know, based on what, as we got the waiver approved, June seemed to be the best time to provide that summer learning. The state, in their legislation, they originally proposed that we do 2 sessions. There is some talk out there among superintendents, I think, that that may come back as unwaiverable. But so we may have to have provide an opportunity in June and July. Hopefully, there'll be enough influence from superintendents that we'll be able to ask for a waiver and do it in June, so we can maximize that. But to that point, the earlier we can start in June and get started, we can offer that summer school period, and still, hopefully students that need that intervention will be ready to come, and then we'll be able to still have some time off.
To get back to, we're getting past this. I'm jumping around. There's a lot of things. Marlene, you really said a lot of things I wasn't expecting. Is staff recommending option A or option B?
Staff recommends option A.
All right. So next question is, I would like us to have, and again, I'd be tongue-in-cheek when I say, or do they really want this? Because I know traditionally we've asked teachers, and they tend to have a view of things they would like in the calendar that not the rest of the world likes.
Mm-hmm.
I would like, as a board, for us to have some more very intentional discussions as we look at creating those next 2 years' worth of calendars. I still have my preferences on things I would like to see removed from the calendars that I've been fighting for a couple of years to get taken out of there, such as that second day off that I simply do not think we need.
Important day.
It is not an important day. Plenty of districts do not have that day, and they get along just fine. So, but that said, I think those are some discussions I'd like us to have as we come up and have, when it comes back in January, you say, correct?
Yes, sir. It comes back, and may I add a counterpoint, if you would? What I do is I want to do what's best for schools, what's best for what works, and looking at the research and looking at not just systems, but even other countries that show that are outperforming where they should be. And one of the things that you keep seeing come back over and over is the amount of time teachers have for PD and planning. And, that's one of the reasons you want to be intentional about giving them those extra days for planning and for the professional development. So, I wish we could give them more days to work, as we call it, in their collaborative meetings, or you may have heard a teacher, my PLCs, to be able to plan, because, the better the planning, the better the instruction that you will see. And I know a lot of districts, and I know Murray County took it out a few years ago, but a lot of districts still adhere to having those half days by quarter where teachers have that opportunity to meet with each other, collaborate, and plan. And, and the research shows that's best practice. Give teachers more time, intentional time to plan. So I'll always push back when we talk about taking days out or taking things away, because teachers need that time to collaborate, to plan, and to be trained. We're going to be very more intentional next year about our professional development, because I've already talked to our principals. Excuse me. And, part of the budget is we want to be intentional about having a professional development plan from principals, and being able to say if that's what, your plan is, and it does fit the scope of your school improvement plan and our our own strategic plan, being able to fund them through a budget process, or so that's where I would give pushback.
If I just respond to that one part of that, I just want to say, nobody said, and we've never said to take PD days out. What I think several of us on the board have said through the years was not to drag parents and kids along on those half-day PD days, forcing people that have jobs and have to then drop their kid off at 8 a.m. and then come right back 2 hours later and pick them up again, knowing that no educational or academic benefit is being had in that short period of time. You can argue that all you want, but again, these are people that have jobs and have to figure out how to do child care and figure out picking up their kids and all those things. It's not easy. So that's the reason that I know several of us have really fought for that one, because I hear parents that struggle with that. So as I've said all along, if a teacher needs PD, if they need time for that, we need to give it. We need to be, as a district, intentional about that, but we don't have to drag the parents and the kids along for the ride on that. It's just not required. We can do it in other ways.
Ms. Parker.
Yes, I like Mr. Moore, am not a fan of any half days. We still have that one before Christmas, and I think that one's fine. Kids are having fun, they're having their parties, and everybody's ready to go for the holidays. But, if our goal is to have instructional days, then I think the kids need to be there, and they need to be there the full time, as much as we can get them there. I did like what Ms. Urban said, though, about the March 13th day, and I just want to throw this out there. I know you said we work with the community on Meal Day and all that. Personally, I don't know what benefit we get from having our school have to be closed during that entire week when Meal Day is that following weekend. I think most of the Meal Day activities start on like Thursday and Friday, so if we wanted to close on Thursday and Friday and then flow into the following week where you have people that may be traveling for Easter and be off for Good Friday, to me that makes more sense than having the week before coming back for 4 days and then being off for Good Friday. Just from a flow standpoint as a parent, if people want to leave town for Meal Day, then they have a little bit of extra time to do that, and I think that would be beneficial. But I think Ms. Urban brought up a lot of really good points, and I like option A as a parent too.
I don't know how you want us to do this, but let me tell you all, I taught when we didn't close the schools for Meal Day, and I found myself having horses attached to the door to get in. And, they use the facilities, mostly Central High School, of course, but I like her idea, though, that at least on Thursday and Friday, that's when they all seem to come in and all. But I don't know, how do you want us to vote on this? I don't understand.
What I would probably advise is let's not put it on consent, bring it back, and reach out to us, and we can build option C if we need to bring it back, and then the January 4th meeting you can vote on those three, and even say, as a board, can discuss, no, we'd rather have this change too.
Did you have your usually committee look at these new, a committee made up of teachers and parents?
So we have, we did a survey. We also did it with the Parent Advisory Council. We didn't have like an official calendar committee because we'd already approved this calendar. Because we have so many, we've had so many changes to the legislature trying to change those calendars. I really wanted us to come back and review we were going to keep the 22-23 calendar you have already approved. So it is on the agenda for us to make adjustments, and we would have to resubmit that back to before the end of the school year. What I'd like for us to do is come back and look at 23-24 to talk about some of the adjustments you had, to try to, and the reason why I tried to separate them is because we had those legislative changes, and I don't want that to, because there are going to be some other days in 24 is an election year, of course, that we need to look at and make a better decision, and be able to, if we're going to make a change in a calendar, after 24 might be the year to do it, because we still have those. We need to talk about it because we still have those summer school obligations, and those impact how, if we adjust anyway in the beginning of the year, it's going to make us go longer at the end of the year, unless, like you said, we start to say, hey, let's make Thanksgiving break 3 days. Unless we do some things like that, which by our survey that we said, a lot of people still like Thanksgiving break, they still like fall break, they still want to break in the spring, they want to be out before Memorial Day in general. So you got kind of those parameters. The only thing we've heard different that people want to do is they want to start later. Yeah. So.
And end earlier.
Yeah. So if we start later, it's going to be, we're going to have to eat some days in between to do that. We're going to have to, we're going to have to relook at what we've had traditionally for a few years, i.e., do we need to do Thanksgiving different? Do we need to do fall break different? Do we need to, because, we still have to meet those instructional days, 175, that we have, and so we have to get those in.
All right. Ms. Irvin, and then we'll move on because we're going to put it on new business. And Mr. Lindsay also. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Lindsay. Well, you were next. I'm so sorry. Were you ahead of me, or? Huh?
Thank you. Hey, I just wanted to mention, I appreciate what you said, Mr. Hickman, about the professional development and planning time. Having been a former teacher, I completely understand the importance of that, but maybe things have changed. I just want us to make sure that we're being very intentional with our professional development, because I know usually, especially those that happen during the middle of the year, to me those were almost like wasted days, or days that were like, yay, let me get to go talk to other adult friends. I did not see them, but what I would, just because it come up, I wanted to say this. I do know that we do have some teachers that, especially like are on block scheduling, who are maybe even having upward of like an hour and a half planning, where we have like maybe some other elementary teachers that are maybe even getting as minimum of like 30 minutes planning. And to me, that's what makes or breaks a teacher, is the time that they have in a day-to-day situation to plan and prepare for their kids. So I say that to say, I hope that and I know, like you say, you can only do what you can do within a certain facility, but I do think that's important. But I think anything we can do to be creative and getting teachers as much planning on a day-to-day basis would be more helpful to me than a mid-year professional development, in my opinion, which is not worth much.
Mr. Lindsay?
I hadn't really thought about it till someone down there brought it up, but when you look at spring break and the way it falls in 2023, you could move 4 of those spring break days to the week after Mule Day. That would give a full week off, and then as someone said, Thursday things don't ramp up out at Columbia Central till Thursday. So and Friday, and really not even till Friday. But we could do a PD day. We could move that 13th of March PD to Thursday the 23rd, and then have the 24th and the move the PD day to the 30th, and then be out of school from the 31st through the 10th. And talking about what Mr. Moore, even that March the 13th, those PD days on Mondays, that's a hindrance for parents to try to find something to do with their kids for one day. Whereas if we butt all those together, now they have a longer stretch, and then of course it doesn't benefit those that have to come to work on that Thursday, but everybody else that would extend their time that they could take off if we did something like that. But just an idea as we move toward this, and then another idea that's not very popular, and I'll wind up in the paper for saying this today, but we've got to think outside the box when it comes to employment moving forward in the future, and I would like for you guys to explore the legality of 4-day school weeks. Nobody panic yet.
Okay. We've just kind of gone a little off topic here, but that kind of woke us up. No, okay.
I need to bring something up before this one.
I'm not going to discuss this.
Okay.
I'm going to. You can say
no,
what you say,
but
I'm not ready to debate that tonight.
No, I need a clarity question
All right.
on the EA pay. Doug and I have been talking about it, and we're looking at are you asking a $15 regardless, that's what they get, or have the steps in it for the longevity?
Bring back a new set, the new pay scale,
So, okay,
starting at 15, just the pay scale.
thank you. That's what we were wanting to get clarity on.
Do you want them hourly or salary as well?
What are
Because
they?
currently it's salary. It's not actually an hourly.
It's whatever they are now.
Okay.
We're talking about sheer dollars.
Okay.
We can do it both ways.
Okay, we're gonna put the school calendar, A, B, C, D, and E. No, whatever. I like all the suggestions, but I think until we can see it, how it, count the days up, see how it all flows and all, and, we'll vote on it at the next meeting, right? Let's move on. Zoning and facilities. Mr. Pearman.
Good evening. The first thing we have tonight is an operations update. We had gotten away from doing these for a little bit, and when Mr. Hickman came back to Mr. Gaines and I and talked about this, before when we did operation updates, I issued you just a one-page document that was an overview of each department. And as we move forward out of this month into coming months, we will pick a department, a project, or an issue that we're facing on the operations side, go more in depth on that, and actually speak to it and give you kind of an update on that specific whatever that month, and then provide the update. This month, simply, I just tried to get with all of our leads in these departments and talk about the things that they're doing. I won't bore you with reading through that, but you can see they are very busy. Probably the main two things that I would mention to you is, on our side of the house, we are working on a project calendar for the spring and for the summer, because we do have numerous projects that will impact the day-to-day of the buildings, and we're trying to figure out, with summer school and with many of the types of things that are being asked coming off of this pandemic, that we are the least intrusive to each building. We know we're going to have to be pretty intrusive to some, but we have some pretty major projects we're going to bring to you in the next coming months, from flooring to different types of things in the building that would be pretty intrusive. We're working on a calendar, and hopefully we'll be able to share that relatively soon. The next thing is just to update you on the two building projects that we're working on. The Santa Fe gym is coming together conceptually pretty quickly. I spoke to Mr. Hubble last week. We're going to meet with them and go through kind of the rundown of where we're going to place it, the scope of work, that type of thing, and start receiving their feedback. The front end work is just so much technicalities that we've really kind of just had to make some decisions on the front end and then go back and say, okay, here we are, what now? We have in the last week, since I saw you last week, several of us from the operations department toured White House Heritage High School in Robertson County. Today we went to Summit and toured part of their building, and what we're trying to do is go to places that have done some things right and say specific spaces. Let's go look at what a science lab is looking like. Let's go look at different parts of the building, whether it be the event center, if you want to call it that, the flow of the building, how they've handled the layout around parking and things like that. We are very deep in the project, in the programming portion of this building. And speaking to the architects today, Mr. Hall and I have a meeting with them tomorrow. We think in January we will have some concepts on, they're going to bring us 3 concept phases on how that building could sit on that property and what it might look like kind of schematically from there. Once we have that information, then the architects and Hewlett Spencer both will start coming to you to issue reports. And the money you approved earlier tonight in a budget amendment was just to get the initials going, the core drilling that has to take place, and the things that are the front end work that aren't huge expenses, but they have to happen. And by you doing that budget amendment, we can now flow freely through that process. So we are coming along and look to be moving pretty quickly through that. If you look through this one-page document and you have any questions, please reach out to me or any of the leads for my departments. And I will, and I thought about this while you were speaking earlier, I will start including the lead and a link to their email and everything on this document for you, so that you don't have to search for anything. You can look at it, click it, and go from there. And if you prefer it to be any different than this, please let me know and we'll move forward from there. The next two items, the train report and the the capital report and the train report, are just the FYIs that you get monthly. Train will be here in the next couple of meetings with some really good news. We've met with them on the energy savings. I will say, not to advocate for anything, but a 4-day week would be a major energy savings for you guys. Yeah. Just as you're looking for money to find, and just dig on that a little bit. So we do have good news on those ends, though, and things have moved really, really well. One thing that's not on here, just as an update, once the county commission approves the budget amendment that does impact McDowell, and I think I may have spoken to this last week, 65 to 72 days from the day that I can give the go-ahead will be the complete process of removing that site. So just so you know, once they give us that go-ahead in January, then probably in March to early April, we'll have that site cleared, and then we can start discussions on how you feel about that. 7.3.2.3 is the 5-year recommendation. I have 4 documents under there for you, and looking at this, it's kind of one scope right now, and then a little bit of a different scope later. In looking at this 5-year plan, we're asking you to approve the projects that we see over the next 5 years. The funding and which years we choose to fund which projects or ask for funding come during the capital report of the budget season. We need this document approved, changed however you want it to change, questioned however you want it to question before we can do that capital report. And we've been asked to issue capital and our operating budgets earlier this year. So if we can get this approved in January in whatever form you guys talk it into, then that allows me to begin the funding portion of how we would move forward with this. The 4 documents I created for you, first is just my memo on the 5-year plan. You will see what I did was include the items that were from there last year. The bold items were just carryovers, and then the red items at the bottom are items that were funded. And you can see those there. If they are in just regular print, non-bolded, then they are items that we have added to the list this year. All of these things were things that were discussed at the retreat. And again, we're not setting the timeline or the funding source in which we ask for these, but these are the items that we do see in the next 5 years. The document that supports that is a spreadsheet, and it is the document I referred to at the retreat where we went through every grade by every school and gave you the numbers that are there so you can see them. The front report kind of encompasses everything on our facilities. It gives you the date of construction, the square footage, the acreage, the capacity, the enrollment. And remember, we pulled that 10/19 date. That was the day before your retreat, and we stuck with that number. The last 4 columns have formulas in them that use the growth rate for each of the different parts of the county and mirrors what we are seeing in our schools. So the 5-year projected enrollment is actually a formula that comes straight from from the census, from the state, as far as what we've seen with enrollment numbers, and that formula multiplies out. In red, those are schools that you would see in 5 years that would be over capacity. Yellow are schools that would be approaching capacity. And again, these are projections based off of current numbers, and it's just always going to be fluid. If we did this again in the summer or in the fall, those would change a little bit.
There may be, let's stop at this point and do the 5th grade here in a minute. In case there are any questions, Ms. Parker, I'll call on her.
Eric, I just wanted to ask you on the 5-year plan recommendation, all those items, are those like 1A and 1B, or are you setting priority with those numbers?
We did not, and that's why I mentioned to you that when we come back to capital, once you approve this plan, then our next discussion is the order in which you wish to ask for funding. And so they are in the order pretty much that they moved in from last year's plan. We just moved them up and snuck in. The only thing that really kind of moved in was number 2, and you know we've spoken plenty of times about that Spring Hill High School facility. We just have to have some sort of decision on the future of it one way or the other, whether it's an elementary, a secondary site, that type of thing. That's not specific to the program, just kind of the future where we see. But the others, number 1, number 3, number 4, that's the order they were listed in on last year's plan, and we just migrated that up. You guys obviously set the order in which we would ask for funding.
Gotcha. The reason why I asked is I actually had a constituent that said to me recently, if you go back and look at what we had from Dr. Register's plan, going back to that, number 1 on that list was what? Combined Baker and McDowell.
And McDowell, yes.
And we did away with McDowell. We haven't expanded Baker, and now it's essentially like number 4 on here. So, I mean, that's why I just wanted to make sure that when we're talking about order or priority or any of that, I just want to make sure it wasn't set, because that constituent was like, why'd you not do what you guys said you were going to do back in 2014, 2015? And I just wanted to be able to answer them.
Yeah,
and I recognize we haven't said anything, but I think that is a discussion point that we as a board need to be able to flesh out.
And I would just say the Dr. Register report is a love-hate report kind of for everybody. It's great to quote when it benefits us, and it's horrible when it doesn't. We do pull, there is useful information in my world for formulas and different types of things. I would point out one of the things they recommended was to close Mount Pleasant Elementary. We haven't gone that route. In fact, if you look at the plan and then you read the 5th grade memo, we're kind of doubling down on maybe not doing that in the next little bit. So I appreciate it, and that's why we didn't really set an order tonight, and we didn't say this is the priority, because we feel like that's a discussion that, again, falls to you guys. I'm an information provider, and I can make a recommendation if you choose for me to, but the first thing is to always let you guys work through and talk about it.
Gotcha. One other question on the programming for the high school. I assume that you're doing it from an academic standpoint. Are you also looking at it from an athletic standpoint?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. And in fact, right now, while we are asking them to fund us or to quote us a couple of different things, specifically the reason we went to White House Heritage was to look at their athletic indoor layout. The reason we went to Summit today, we looked at locker rooms and weight rooms for a school that size. Interestingly enough today, we saw where Williamson County is expanding Summit, and it will be a 2,200 student facility once that expansion is over. So we see that as we go to commissions and they tell us that a 2,000 is way too large and you can never do it, this may be in the next 5 to 10 years the medium-sized school that you start to see built, not on the large end. But yes, we're doing that. We have asked the architect also through lengthy discussion to quote us a new stadium versus the retrofit of the other stadium, and we've worked through. They're going to price both, and then we will make an economical decision. But we do have some real issues there. I'll quote Mr. Hall. We bought 241 acres, and we have a parking problem based off of the first design. And so we're working through those things. We're looking specifically at not just athletics, but the CTE portion of the building, the band portion of the building, the auditorium, all of that. So while the heart of what we're doing is setting around academics, we are focused on all spaces for children. Kind of working through some hard numbers right now. This is very, very tight, and we've had to make some concessions and have some hard discussions. We spoke today about coaches' offices, and I made the statement, we are focusing on the areas in which children learn and grow before we focus on amenities for adults. And so we know you have to have certain things to live in a building, but we're focused on children first, and we're working through some hard decisions. Hopefully we'll be able to bring those to you very soon.
Well, I would just like to say, I hope that we can kind of be brought up to date on some of that stuff, just because, you know, what that high school is, how big it is, you know, what it's going to have to serve from an academic, CTE, and athletic standpoint. I mean, I don't know that we need to to cut every corner. You know, if we're gonna have to be wedded to that building for a really long time, and potentially, it sounds like if the growth in that area continues, we might be looking at doing an expansion there in short order too. So I just think we need to be really realistic about planning for that future growth up there.
And that's our goal, is to bring you the optimal plan, but then also, as we've worked through it, to have the just in cases. And if we have to decide between this and this, we want to have had a lot of discussion before we bring those to you and say, by the way, here it is. We should see some schemes for layouts in January, and I feel like that's the best time to have the initial discussion, because you guys could actually kind of see it, and it not just be the theory or the concept in the air that you kind of say, well, you know, I think I know what that's going to look like. So we've worked very diligently at this point to get to that.
Mr. Moore, I see your light, but let me just say one other thing. I know that as a board, you saw the letter from Ms. Shirley about the state of the central office and how it is not at all a good situation for a person of disabilities or even a person of age, such as me, I guess. But I think we need, and look how it's spread out, there's not enough space for anything. I think that part of our plan is, it just needs to be in our discussion as to what do we do down the road, what do we make plans, and where is there maybe a place that we can do that. And I know we haven't talked about it in the retreat, but I think there's a safety issue at the central office. It's not really enough room. It's not really, you know, there's so many issues as far as what people with disabilities might have to encounter. And we had an incident down there not long enough, just a week or so ago, and we were thankful that it was ended up as well as it could, but it could have been really, really bad. So I just think we all need to keep that in mind. Mr. Moore.
Okay. And I agree with you, Ms. Kinzer. I think we, as I've said all along, that we need to be operating less plants, and I think moving a direction where we're not operating central office in the place it is now is a wise choice, and I think that'll help take care of that. And I believe if you look at the 5-year plan, it plays into some of the other discussions we've had about reutilizing some of our existing schools if we end up building some new ones. And I think, again, my goal would be to operate less plants so we can be more efficient in that regard. To go back to the Spring Hill, the high school, I will say, having sat in on some of the programming meetings for both of the Battle Creek schools, and then sitting in on the first one for this one, I felt very impressed that for once that we have an architect that I feel like has heard what it seems like staff told them that we said we wanted. And I got a different feel out of those meetings from the previous ones. Previously, design and look kind of monopolized the discussion, to be frank. What I got out of the early discussion so far was that the architect has heard what we're looking to do and is taking that very serious, and is trying to make sure we get what we've asked for. So I can really appreciate that. To go with that, I know also in that first discussion, one of the things that I walked away from is that I was very concerned that we are not going to have enough money to build this school. And when I hear that the potential may be there, that in a couple of years, it may need to be a 2,200 student high school, and making sure that we don't squeeze, like Ms. Parker said, the core of the building. Because remember, that's where we got to with the current Spring Hill High School. This core was squeezed. We added students, and frankly, again, Spring Hill High School has capacity for classrooms of 1,600, 1,700 students. The core's not there for it. So I just want to make sure, I think we may need to have some discussions as we move ahead with this. If that amount of money doesn't give us what we have determined as a board we need. I'm not saying to go extravagant, but I don't want to get into another situation, and we've done it several times. We did it with Central High School. We did it with the Battle Creek schools, where and we've done it before that. I'll be honest, it happened with Marvin Wright when certain discussions narrowed the hallways, for example. And there's been other things that have happened. I just want to make sure that if we've decided we need certain things as our floor, we've done it with sporting facilities, we need to do it with our programming. I'm glad to hear those discussions are continuing on that. But we need to make sure that if we decided we need it, we've got to take a stand on those things. And then when I say need, I mean really need. Like you're saying, if these are academic needs we have to make sure we can educate those kids in the proper classroom settings, we can't squeeze that part away. So I think we may need to continue, if you guys can keep us kind of abreast of what that looks like, so we can, if we need to have additional discussions on what funding looks like, we may need to do that to make sure we do this right. Because we have had a very poor I know everybody's going to say, I'm in Spring Hill, this is a Spring Hill school, but I think we've done it time after time. I've done it myself here sitting on this board, and I think we need to stop making short-sighted decisions that we end up paying a lot for in the long run. I'll just be honest. That's what we end up doing.
So I will say, first off, I think when you meet our architect, you will be very impressed with him. He calls, he texts, he asks questions. When we walked White House Heritage last week, he specifically stopped me several times and said, tell me why you're saying what you're saying about how students were moving in the building, about how supervision could take place in large spaces, and how they were managing those spaces. So he's very much seeking to understand us and what we're seeing and asking of them, and he has been very diligent as well. I mentioned to you before, we use our GMP process. They are building 4 schools right now under a hard bid process. So he is very aware of how that works and what they're looking like from numbers on people. There is a school being a high school being hard bid in a couple of weeks in Metro, and we'll start seeing what some numbers come in, and it'll be a realistic number from the hard bid program, and then we'll have a better idea there of where we lay with this. So we're working through that. The other thing that I would just mention to you, and we've talked at times about the prototype school that we would maybe replicate in the future, and what we've really kind of moved into is that at the end we're going to have our prototypical program. And if a site offers a different opportunity depending on the lay of the land, one of the things we found on this site is there's a tabletop of land in that area that we thought we would just probably have to dig down and remove, and they've come in now and said this thing's 500 by 600 feet. We can set part of this building on top of that, and this be maybe a 3-story on the front, but not on the back. And then that program and the concepts that we build into that building, the next time we take a high school, they move, not necessarily the exact footprint, but the concepts, and we start making decisions as we've talked about. What does a high school look like in Murray County? What does a elementary school as we move forward look like in Murray County? And that program is so important both to us as a staff that will govern what can happen in that building, but then also to you guys where you can say this is what we value and move forward from there. So we're working hard through that. Hopefully concepts will be to you pretty soon. And again, some of this front end work is just the monotonous talk on the front end that we're really working through, and just know we've kind of taken this on from my side as a holistic approach. Dave and I are leading a lot of the conversation. Chris went with us last week. Jonathan Berry went with us last week. Brian Parkhurst is meeting with them. We're asking information from Tommy. Glenn on Tommy's team is extremely involved and going to be involved moving forward. So we're not trying to say this is a building that Eric and Dave are putting out and bringing to you. We're including instruction staff. We're going to talk to lead teachers across the county as far as the arts rooms and things like that. But ultimately, in the end, it comes back to some hard decisions because if you ask them what they want everything. And then so you have to kind of really take and fit everything together and say what is reasonable and what is good for children. And that's our first priority right now. So,
Mr. Lindsay.
I'm full of unpopular ideas tonight, but as we move forward, I think we have to think outside the box as far as construction goes. How that high school functioned 20 years ago is different than how it will function in 20 years. And what I'm about to say is not very popular at all, but on block scheduling, for all intents and purposes, at any point in time during the day, you can walk in a school and 25% of it is sitting vacant. And I get you can argue that, but 25% of those classrooms, there's not kids sitting in them. So at $250 or $275 a square foot, I don't know where we're going to be at a 900 square foot classroom. You know, that's several $1,000s worth of school construction that sits empty. Now, the unpopular part is, you know, we all went to college. Our professors walked in with a backpack and a laptop and their book, and they taught class. And they didn't have a home. They didn't have a room that was their home. They had an office. They had a 10 by 10 office or a 10 by 12 office, and that was where they hung out during the day. But I say that's not popular. I get it, but when we're looking at construction costs where they are, and when we look at the utilization of buildings, I just think we have to think we may have to look at things different than we've ever looked at them. And then you go to auditoriums. What are auditoriums? 6, 7, 8, 9,000 square feet. And again, at $250 or $275 a square foot, you have a great big area that costs a ton of money that doesn't get used a whole lot. That sits empty a lot of the time. So, I think that the pandemic has taught us a lot of things. But we don't necessarily have to teach. We don't necessarily have to do things the way we've always done them. And especially as technology moves forward, things are different today than they were 20 years ago. So I don't think we need to build schools the same way either. But again, I know that's unpopular. And then I just want to make a comment on central office. I agree with Ms. Kinzer. 6, 7 years ago, I don't know when it was, but there was a proposal brought to us to add an elevator to central office. And I'm gonna get these numbers wrong, but the initial estimate on it was $280,000 or something, and I voted no against it then, and then we put it out to bid, and it come back at $480,000. And I made the statement I wasn't for it at $280. I'm sure not for it at $480. But my point being, and I said I said this that night, I'd rather take that $480,000 and put it toward a new building, as I had put it into to that old building there. So, and that $480,000 today is probably $800,000. I don't know what that number is, but I still have that same feeling. I brought up an idea of a new central office to a commissioner, and he said, you guys don't have it on your 5-year plan. So I think we need to get it on our 5-year plan. And I know why we haven't had it on it, because it looks like we're being selfish or we're wanting bells and whistles, but we're really not. I mean, when you look at that building is not functional. It was not set up to be an office building. It doesn't even have enough room to house the people we have. I mean, there's nothing good about it. So I think we need to put that in our 5-year plan, and we can be realistic. I mean, we've got to be realistic about it, but I agree that we need to start having that conversation, and maybe it happens sooner rather than later.
So just a couple of things off of his comments. I actually made the comment, I think, to Chris today as we stood in a ticket booth at Summit High School that had been converted into the baseball coach's office, and I said, we have to think right now about what people will do to this building 10 and 15 years from now. So we have to have spaces that are nimble, that can be multifunctional, and can be converted over, and you're not just having someone come in and find some space to create something. We've talked about that with classroom spaces too. Not hardcoring you to one thing and it's locked in forever. If it needs to change over time, it doesn't become a complete retrofit. And how can we accomplish those things? The auditorium, we've talked to everybody and said, how many kids do you take to your auditorium? There's 817 seats, something like that at Central. They take a grade at a time. The only time it's full is when Columbia Dance Academy rents it from us. So we don't need an 817-seat auditorium. We need a auditorium that can handle a class, so they can do a meeting. So we've had those types of discussions. We actually saw a teacher workroom at Summit High School today that had large locker spaces for teachers who teach off of carts to keep their things in spaces. So I think those are all conversations that are very relevant as we move forward. Again, now they're adding, classroom wing because they don't have enough space, but things are changing, and we're trying to make sure that we don't lock something in to be an old building, but we're trying to make it nimble, and plan for things as best we can to go from there. I mentioned to a couple of folks at the beginning before the meeting, we were talking about the elevator. We did not add a central office to this 5-year plan because we didn't want to make the assumption that we could just do that. That's not been something that we've kind of really talked about in depth at a retreat. We've bannered it about. We've had a lot of conversations about it in our building, as we, I work downstairs, Jennifer works downstairs. It was the cafeteria. Every office that was built in that building has been built by our maintenance staff. In fact, we called them a couple of weeks ago to come and put a new door into an office to convert a space, and they didn't have a problem at all. They just cut the wall because they didn't close the door. They just cut the wall and opened the door back up and kind of went back to where it was. It's been retrofitted over and over and over and over. So we didn't want to make that assumption. We can bring conversation to you guys about that, but really that's your direction. So that's why it wasn't brought here. The things here were only things that we've had discussion with you guys, and we felt like that discussion in a retreat had pointed us towards keeping it on a list.
Mr. Howe.
I mean, I think it's interesting the things you're talking about doing is what Culleoka and many unit schools have done for years. I mean, an auditorium is called a Culleoka classroom. So is a closet. So is carts. I mean, there's 6 teachers that teach on carts at Culleoka right now. So I mean, the things you're talking about, we've just had to deal with, and I think that's part of it. Is sometimes we just have to be creative in our own buildings and figure things out. And what works at one building may not work at another. One building may not need a large auditorium because they don't have a very big arts program, or one building may need a super large one. It's going to be about the needs of the school and the students. I mean, it's students first, and not all of our students can be pigeonholed into one shoebox. They're all different individual, and their populations are different individual. So I think that going forward, we need to make sure that we look at that and make sure that, I mean, obviously, if we just wanted to build a spec school across our county, we could do that. I mean, Williamson County does that, right? Yet people are moving here because maybe they want a little individuality into their schools. They want something different besides, let's just whitewash everything and make everything the same. So just be mindful of that.
Ms. Kinzer, one thing I would say, the prices on here have been adjusted, discussing with specific discussions from architects, from the builders that we're working with now, with Hewlett Spencer, and based off of what we're seeing this type of building cost in other districts right now. And then the last thing I'll say about this is, we've talked several times about land purchases. This isn't on there because that's not part of the 5-year building plan. That would be something that comes to you during the capital discussion to decide whether we add it to the capital request or not.
Your report, you want to go on? You want to say something about the 5th grade?
Yes, ma'am. In the 5th grade report, Mr. Hickman asked me specifically to look at what it would take to move 5th grade back to the elementary schools from the middle schools. In looking at that, we did a couple of things. One, I provided you this same sheet that was provided in the 5-year. However, if you look with the enrollment, that is with moving the 5th grade back right now, because that's the most realistic numbers we have. If we moved them back right now, this is what it would put the school populations at. Your multipliers are still the same because that's the growth for that area. So you see that how much red is created in the elementary realm in doing that. If you look at the report, we give you specifics on Columbia, Spring Hill, and Mount Pleasant as to what it would need to be done with. It does provide a little, however, let me say that. If you look at the recommendations at the bottom, they are the 5-year plan. The 5-year plan accomplishes this. And so We may be able to, if a building is built in one area sooner than another, go ahead and move one area, and then the next year move another area. Spring Hill would take a rezoning of the 3 elementary schools. It needs that North Columbia Elementary School initially to help it, because long term, this is the challenge we have. Not just moving 5th grade back to our elementary schools, but sustaining them being there. Because it's not going to do us any good just to build something and move them back and then turn around and go, crap, we really can't stay here, you know, and then move right back. So this plan, what we've looked at is not just moving them back, but sustaining them. I did take, and you notice the liberty is the three unit schools were just pulled from this, because they can just decide kind of how 5th grade fits in with their building. This just addresses the standalone elementaries and middles. The opportunity that is provided here is that your middle school population is lower. One, which help us significantly over time to maintain that middle grade seat count and to be able to be functional. It allows us to look at Columbia and maybe do some shifting of areas that we've not been able to do as things are full. It allows us to look at areas across from Mount Pleasant to Spring Hill and say, do we shift certain parts north or south from there? So we really look at, as those numbers fall, it's an opportunity. They would fall basically to where Spring Hill Middle fell when Battle Creek was opened, and then you see that those numbers rise back pretty quickly. It would also, if we get creative, allow us opportunities to talk about some programs that could move into those facilities, and maybe opportunities that we could program into some of those schools. Those are our highest needs schools. Our highest underperforming ATSI schools are our middle schools. This would lessen their population, allow us to have some space in those buildings, and maybe do some things that move forward. So as you look at that, that's not a negative that those numbers drop. It is an opportunity to really hit the place that we need to hit. And the 5-year plan and this report do coincide. They are not different. They are the same program and the same plan brought to you. And again, all we're asking tonight is this: are you happy with this 5-year plan? We can add a central office to it. The question of priority and funding come during the capital discussion.
Well, I for one think you've included everything we talked about in the retreat. I would like to see something about a central office, whether, you know, look into that, and it should be on our 5-year plan without
Yes, ma'am.
doubt.
We can do that.
Huh? What? Too easy.
We've had lots of discussions, so I think we're pretty prepared to maybe bring you some options on that.
Well, there you go. I'm glad that I've given you something easy, so that's good. All right, I'm sorry, Mr. Lindsay?
You've told us that we need to make a decision on it, and we skirted around it, but we've got to figure out what in the heck we're going to do at current Spring Hill High School, and sooner rather than later. And I don't know how. I mean, I don't know if we just put it on the agenda, you bring a recommendation, but we can't just keep kicking that can down the road. And maybe the answer is we've already answered that question. I don't know, but I think we've got to give staff some direction of here's what we're going to do with that, and because that affects. I mean, when building a new high school, I mean it's not going to be too long that you're going to start having to come up with a zone, and depending on what we do there affects that. It affects a lot of things on the 5-year plan, and so I guess I'm looking for guidance from you guys, and maybe more than just guidance. Maybe saying that, by golly, you need to let me know something by this date where we can go on with it.
So you'll notice that in this plan, number 2 is renovation of current Spring Hill High School facility. Recommendation is to renovate the current site to serve as a secondary school once the newly approved high school opens. Our recommendation right now is that we're saying to you guys, we think this should be in some form. A K-12, a 512, if we're still at that point, a 712, a 912. I've drawn zones already because that's a huge part of what we're doing. I have play zones throughout our whole system to say, if we did this, what would it look like? I think, digging into the numbers and looking at it, that that in 3 years we're going to make the decision that it stays a high school. And I see that. I think that helps combat the conversation we just had of we build a new school and very quickly we're doing what they're doing at Summit and turning around. I see that zone could benefit the Spring Hill area, the whole western side of the eastern side of the county. It's going to help that North Columbia area. And we look at the centers of Columbia and listening to them talk about how they're growing. They're putting a center of the city at Bear Creek, but they're putting one at Neapolis eventually too. It's going to be a little part of Columbia up there that can sustain life without coming into Columbia proper. And we see that growth up there. I really dig into the numbers and say, if we say a secondary school, we walk through options on it, I feel like we're going to come back to a 912 option. It's a limited 912 option. We know it can't be expanded to be huge, but that alleviates Columbia Central. That allows the new school to grow. It allows us to do some shifting to make things make sense on the eastern side of the county, and it allows us to allow growth to occur, and us, for I hate to say this, for once looking like we're prepared for that growth. If this is a high school, then our high school count becomes very favorable for the short-term future, and I say that the next 7 to 8 years. We just said our middle school count, if we can accomplish moving 5th grade, is very doable and very advantageous to us probably over the next 10 to 12 years. Our elementary then would be allow us to focus on new schools, in some cases larger schools. It would accomplish maybe some of the things that people have said about operating fewer plants. Those types of things move into, and we see that it alleviates. Columbia is growing very fast right now. And I say Columbia, the city of Columbia. It's expanding its city limits. It is growing within. And its pace right now is something we're going to struggle to keep up with. We're going to be talking about Columbia over the next couple of years the way we've talked about Spring Hill over the last couple of years. And unfortunately, I think we're still going to be talking about Spring Hill in that same light as well, but Columbia's pacing up. And so I think our recommendation is tonight or in January we say this is a secondary site. That allows us to start thinking about renovations. They're the same whether it's a 612 or a 912 basically, but it gives us time to come back to with you guys and really discuss a program, because we know we're not moving out of that building for a couple of years, and it gives us time to really sit down, talk with you guys, see what makes sense, bring it together as a big picture. But I think our recommendation is there. I think the only other thing then is when I thought you were going to say, what do we name these places? But I think that leads to this discussion too. That's important to us. I know it's not to y'all, but we're approaching the phase where Murray County High School doesn't just work all the time. So,
Mr. Moore.
Yeah. I mean, Mr. Lindsay, I'll be honest. I've assumed. I mean, seeing how this, especially in the last retreat we had, that the capacity for additional high school seats just makes the most sense at this point. And it's and this is one of the things that I talked about early on, and I think we always have to be careful about. It didn't quite look exactly like that 14, 18 months ago. It's shifted considerably based on new information, and I know, and I say that out loud because I know as a commission looks at these things, and I know we're trying to plan for 5 years, but just a year and a half worth of time and some additional data has made things look different for us. And even though I'm satisfied that if you were to go ahead and revise number 2 to be that it's going to be a high school site, if that's what you need to do, I don't have a problem with that. But I think the understanding we have to, this is why we need to, I think it puts an exclamation point on why we need to be reviewing this yearly to make sure that we're keeping up with this stuff, because frankly that could change again by the time we get ready to free that site up. I'm not saying it will, but we have to be mindful of that, and I'm appreciative that you guys are actually keeping up with some information to be able to make that decision. For me, what I'm seeing here, and what I would like to see, I guess let me go back to a question. Do we need to have this voted on in January, or could we push this out one more time? Because I know Ms. Kinzer had asked for some additional information.
Is how quickly I have to get a capital recommendation to you for approval. We've been asked to have budgets to Doug by March 1st.
Okay.
Which means that I need to have a discussion in January and February. Now, in February, if we make the decision on this and then we turn around and the next thing is a capital discussion, we can do that. But in January gives us some lead time to develop that funding source request over the next couple of years. And the only other thing is Doug has a new capital request software that every department that is making a capital, if the Parks Department makes a capital request, we're always entering it into the same software. I just functionally have to have time to be able to get those things done so that in March we've met our deadline.
I mean, I just going to say, when I step back and look at this 5-year plan, what I see, and again, based on the information you've been giving us over the last couple of months, is an absolute need for elementary school seating across this county. In the correct places, let me put that in there, because I know that's one of the things we've struggled with, is we have some seating, but it's not always where we need it. I hope, I mean, and again, that's, and to be clear, roughly $100 million gets us to that 5th grade point where 5th grade can now move back to the elementary school. And I think that's probably a discussion that's what I'd asked for last time, was what is the number that gets us there? Because as a board, if we're going to commit to that, we need to know what the number is. We've got to make sure we got funding for it. And I'm glad you brought the other point up about we can't go back on that. I think that's an important thing that we've gone through different phases as a school system. I think we need to be very intentional and perhaps have some discussions about that. If this is the direction we want to go, it's an expensive thing to do. Moving 5th grade, it creates some, I think there's some benefits, but it's an expensive one. And if this is what this board is wanting to do, I want to make sure that we're willing to, as much as we can, commit that this is a long-term decision, that for the betterment of students, we're doing this because this needs to be done 5, 10, 20 years out. What I would hate to see is we spend a lot of money to try to do something, and then with nobody really buying into the fact that maybe 3 or 4 years from now we kind of go backwards because we didn't plan, and then we have to go undo it because we didn't create a concept where this is how we operate in this county.
We hope that this document becomes a 6-month document for renewal. Not necessarily a vote in the middle of the year, but that in maybe June and July we're handing it back to you, and we're saying, based off of what we're seeing before we have our retreat, maybe not that the plan changes, but the notes that go along with it. We're going to have a retreat in the fall, but in the summer we're telling you what we see, because it is at the rate at which we're seeing new growth, it's an ever-changing. It can't just be left alone for a year, because we come back a year later and it goes, it feels like you're changing what you're talking to us about. So we need you to understand that it's a change that sometimes it feels to us like we're changing what we're talking about too, but when we look at what's really happening, it changed. So we hope it's a 6-month, you see it, and then a year, we renew it and come back to it again. I don't think, and I was an administrator when 5th grade started moving. We never saw it as being there this long. So I think the discussion of intentionally where it's going to be is an important one, because I think it just through chance and by circumstance ended up in the middle schools. And if you'd asked someone before it happened, will it in 2022, will 5th graders still be in the middle schools? They would say no. That's not the plan. But I think that by circumstance we got there, and I think that takes deliberate conversation and commitment to not let that happen again.
Okay, I believe Mr. Lindsay, you were next.
One last thing, and I'm done. But you brought up the naming of the high school. We need to go and put it to bed. I just soon you guys bring us recommendations at the work session in January. We can vote on it at our board meeting in February, and we can be done with this.
Works for me, because if you vote no, we'll know you didn't like it. If you vote yes,
well, no, I would ask that you bring options that
we can do that.
Hey, here's what's on our 5-year plan of the current site remaining as a secondary school, the new school's a secondary school, here's our ideas, and let's just, I mean, it doesn't mean a lot to me, and I hate that sounds bad, but I understand where you guys are coming from, and I'm ready to just put it to bed. And
There's just decisions that we make based off of that. And I mentioned this to some folks prior to the meeting. One thing, just so you guys know, and it doesn't just sneak up on you, I'm meeting a structural engineer in the morning at the stadium at Spring Hill High School. We have some real concerns about that concrete stadium and some things that are there. So rather than me telling you it's not safe or us saying we don't think it's safe, we're going to have someone actually come in and look at it and give us and they may say, hey, it's great, it can last 2 more years, 10 more years, and they may say it's got to come down now. But we want to bring that to you so that we have a realistic conversation from someone outside of us that says, hey, this is where you are with that. And if they by chance did come back and say this thing's not safe, then that's a conversation that's outside of this 5-year plan on things to do and how to do them. So just for transparency, we don't want to sneak up on you. We want to make sure you know what we're doing as we move forward.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Irwin, I'll let you be the last word.
Thank you, Ms. Kinzer. This might go without saying. I know you mentioned land earlier, but are we proactively looking for land? I know that that's not actually on this list. I don't know if it should be or if that's something we would look at as a fund balance.
Yeah, I can't. I will say this. I walked across a field I don't own last week.
Okay.
Just exploring somewhere. Not going to tell you where. And I wasn't hunting, so I wasn't interested. But we're looking.
Okay.
Because we want to. If you say this is where we're going, we have to have some options for you and not start that process there, because I don't want to put you in the position of making a decision and then feeling like you just had to sit on your ear because we weren't prepared for a decision one way or the other. So.
Then let's move on to policy. Thank you, Mr. Pearman. A lot of information, good discussion.
The only policy I have this evening is the zero tolerance policy. You all updated. Sorry, it's really.
Oh, it's me.
You guys updated the policy 6.300 a couple months back, and in that has the zero tolerance in there as well. This is a separate policy that just states what zero tolerances is. Also, state law had changed, and the electronic threats isn't listed as that anymore. So this is just changing to where it's consistent with our other policy and also consistent with state law.
Ms. Irvin. No,
I know I'm
you're fine.
on the mic a lot tonight, and I'm sorry. So I reviewed this earlier, and Chad probably specializes in these terms, being, in law enforcement. I don't fully understand completely. I've looked at like aggravated assault versus assault and whatnot. The only thing I wanted to express, what I did see removed, is that was redlined out, was that there was a line that says superintendent of schools shall have the authority to modify this expulsion requirements on a case-by-case basis. That looks like that is being removed. And the reason why I mention that, and again, I don't know if I fully understand how this works, but what I picture, obviously I want, zero tolerance is great. We don't want our students or teachers, anyone in harm's way, but I also have to think about, I hear daily almost, it seems like, from parents who have kids that are being bullied. And a lot of times parents are not feeling like they are heard, and things get ignored. And I just wonder, and this might be a whole different conversation, but what are we doing? I mean, if a kid is attacked first, I want to make sure that self-defense mechanisms are in place where they're not necessarily, a zero tolerance case, because I think everybody has the right to defend themselves. And I don't know how that sets up into this policy. I don't know, but I think it should be worth having. Is it?
Well, this is, and it does mimic state law on what the zero tolerance policy, what state law says the zero tolerance is. So you'd have to get in. I looked up the elements of aggravated assault the other day. I can't remember off the top of my head. But it's more than just an assault, and it does actually have. when I change this, sometimes I change formatting so it looks like something's stricken out, but it is in there where the superintendent can modify that, still. So the zero tolerance by state law is expulsion unless modified by the superintendent. So if there is something, then they can appeal it, and Mr. Hickman can overturn that.
Thank you. I just always want to express, and I know it's different in different schools, but I just always want to leave us an opening to where we allow our administrators and those that we entrust to run a school or run a campus or run our schools to be able to use their common sense in that area, because, like I say, sometimes those are needed. So for whatever that's worth.
To piggyback off that, what Ms. Irvin just said, I guess I come at it a little bit differently in that I don't necessarily have a problem with the superintendent making an adjustment, but I almost feel like I, as a board member, feel like we need to know, because when you start making those adjustments on something that's titled zero tolerance policy, if you make an adjustment at one school and then you don't make an adjustment at another school, all of a sudden then the parent that didn't get the adjustment may be calling us about it. So I don't know if we could put something in there that just notifies us if there's an adjustment to that zero tolerance. And I say that because historically I know that there was an incident where a previous superintendent did stray from this policy, and it was rather significant, and it wasn't something that I as a board member was comfortable with him straying from, to be honest. And we heard a lot about it.
Yeah, I'd have to look. I don't know why you couldn't, but sorry. I was I'd have to look to see to make sure if we can, how we would go about the process of notification the board. But
what if we, as a board, says to the superintendent that if you make a policy, if you modify zero tolerance, we would like to know.
I have no problem, but I want to lean on Jake. What right do they have? What information can I give them, since it's about a specific student?
Just general terms.
It would just be general terms.
General terms, no student's name.
You had a appeal of a zero tolerance violation come before you, and you did X, Y, and Z without getting into
you wouldn't have to
student records.
Okay.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah, I have no problem.
Or actually, that's all. That's it.
Okay.
So you just want language added that states if the superintendent does modify zero tolerance, the board to be notified.
Exactly.
Sure.
All right. If she makes those changes, can we leave this on consent? Okay. All right, then I think we've got a bid. HR software, that's you too, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am, it is. So it's actually right under $15,000 in total for what I'm asking for. The reason it has to come before you is because there is a signed contract, so anything that has a contract has to come before you all. So currently we use a software that, it looks a little outdated. We were in the process of going to a different vendor, and have been building that out. But last month, me and two of my staff members went to a TASPA conference, and while we were there, it's called My Benefits Channel, 5 Points, which our employees actually log into this program already when they see their paychecks. This is the company that actually provides that software already for us. So our staff and our principals would already be familiar with what this looks like to them. This software would be for what our current software is. For that section of it would be actually less than what we're paying. In total on a month, it would be more than what just our talent software is, but it is less than the Chrono software that we had been working with by a significant amount on a monthly basis. Chronos is Doug gave me the numbers, $5,899 a month. My benefits channel is $1,181 a month. That includes our hiring, onboarding, offboarding, HR software. It also gives us a spot where we can house all of our policies and procedures, so our staff can log in and see what procedures that we have. It also, when we publish our job postings, it can automatically push to Indeed, and other job boards. We went to a local county, another county that uses this, and they've seen an increased amount of applicants off of Indeed alone, just from this getting pushed out. It can automatically push to Facebook and things like that. It does offer the ability to text within the software. It comes with about 50 texts a month, and if we find that that is a really good feature, we can maybe perhaps add on more if we need more texting. We do find that a lot of applicants' phone calls don't always work. Emails, I don't know about you guys. I used to be the person that I had to have it have 0 on my email inbox, but I have like almost 3,000 emails now on my personal email inbox, and that's just been something I have to live with. I know it used to kill me, but that's where my life is right now. I have no time to check my personal emails. But that's the world we live in. People are more often to see a text. So even if we just send a quick, hey, we've sent you an offer letter or things like that, and as well, we can send that from the software. So as I have a company cell phone, my staff doesn't have a company cell phone, other people don't. And a lot of people don't want to use their personal cell phones to start texting information out. But anyways, this software offers a lot more than what we already have. And I think they're actually here in Franklin. They are local here to Tennessee. They work with local government who provides our payroll software, so it can integrate with them. They are in 157 local either governments or schools in Tennessee alone. So I've heard nothing but good things. They have an attorney that's on staff that can also provide other resources. It provides, you can see who's looked at an applicant. When you look at somebody, you can see, did this principal actually view this information? You can keep records in there. You can send out the references for, if you need to check people's references, it'll send them an email if you want to. Rather than now, we have automated ones. The other one didn't have anything for references. So it's just we think this would be much better software, and it looks so much easier to use and not like it's from the 1980s or a floating spaceship, which is the one we're going towards. So.
Well, how do you paying it? I'm reading the letter. I don't.
Oh, we have the funds. There's
okay.
Yeah, we already have the money, so there's no problem.
All right.
Is it a multi-year contract?
No, it's a year-to-year contract, so it's not multi-year.
Okay.
I see no other business, so.
I'd like to bring something
I'm
up
sorry.
under
Go ahead.
other business. We talked about this time last year. We explored the idea of the software system that would record our meetings and all that. Oh, I didn't hear you. I promise. And then we talked about we would put it in at budget time, and then we hammered the budget, and so we didn't put it in. Is that something we could? How easily could you bring that back up?
I already got a refresh quote. Mr. Moore and we've already talked about it. I got a refresh quote. We were going to bring it to next budget time, so. Yeah, plus there's also another opportunity for the TSBA might also have some software that we already have the system here that might be something to consider too. But I already have a quote for the stuff, so I actually re-emailed it to Mr. Moore.
And let me add, it's something that we really need to look at because we have currently an OCR review right now of our website, and we have been housing our meetings on YouTube, and YouTube is not approved site for the captions per OCR. So we're getting to a point we've got to do something.
Well, even without knowing that, I would just assume let's go ahead and do it because come budget time, it hits the fan, and it's easy to get lost.
I can send everybody the quote if that'll help.
I mean, I would. I don't know if the board is okay with putting it on at our next meeting, but I would just assume.
That would be my suggestion. You send us a quote and let us see it. We can ask you questions about it, and then put it on new business on the next board meeting. Okay?
Meeting or work session?
Well, I think we would want to vote on it. Huh? We've talked about it for a while. There you go. You're just grinning up from ear to ear.
I'll send it out to everybody, and then if you want it on the next agenda.
Tommy, if I could interject on that, just make sure we're getting what we need. we've spent a lot of time in the past doing various systems and stuff. Make sure, and when I say what we need, I mean, this is something that's kind of, it's gotten more important as people, I've been amazed lately at how many people are watching these things online. It's mind-blowing to me, but there's quite a few people, both staff and the public, that are watching and listening to this, and I think it is vitally important, especially in the way things are now, to make sure we can be heard, and it's not seen as much as heard. That's, to be honest, that's one of the main things with the closed captioning, and be able to actually clearly hear all of us speaking. So make sure what we do is done correctly, so that need is actually met.
And just one thing of clarification, one of the options that we actually put in there is there's the ability to be mobile. So that was one of the options that's in the actual quote, which I'll send that to y'all. So just that was something that was discussed before. It was something, you know, we have the standardization, and there's a, hey, if you want to be mobile, here's how you could do it. So I just, when you guys look at that, keep in mind.
Thanks, Tommy. We'll look forward to seeing it, and I think it really is necessary. And guys, I hope all of y'all have a wonderful holiday. Merry Christmas. There you go. And Friday's a big day, so if any of y'all don't know that, any of you new board members, if you want to have the sweetest thing you've ever seen, then be at Baker School on Friday. Promise you. First time they did this, I cried all day. I know it. Well, no, they're not here.
Once again, we are amazed by how many people looked at this online.
The parade we're going to have in front of the Board of Education with signs saying "Build a New Board" will be Friday.